to episode 158 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all of the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
So, obviously it's a new month, and it's our 4-year...
Oh, it is! It is!
Yeah.
We've officially finished 3 years of podcasting.
It's wild to think about. Like, I know we're getting into a new book, but first, let's have a moment for this. Because, like, we've, like, traveled and we've done stuff in the past 3 years that, like, I'm just proud of us for, like, doing an episode every week for the last 3 years. Like, that's a lot.
Yeah, we have not. I don't think we've missed a week.
No, we haven't.
No, and I think last Christmas was the only time we even discussed maybe taking a week off, and then we were like, nah.
Yeah, because I think we were like, oh, we could do a shorter book and then take a week off to make it easier, but anyway, we just did one in Labrador.
Yeah.
Which, it worked.
It did.
The sound wasn't as good. Sorry, guys. But...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really proud of us.
Me too.
And, like, we don't do this for money.
No.
Not even the whisper of potential money. Like,
no.
We haven't even looked into that. We just do it because we want to.
Yeah, because we love books. And I do think it's, like, kept me reading more. And it, like, I don't know for sure that I would have read Fourth Wing or that I would have read Quicksilver. Like, I don't know if I would have been as into some of the books that we got into as I have been.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that we have this podcast.
Yeah, me too. And it's a good bit of fun.
It is. And it gets us together once a
regularly,
week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's just sometimes it's not. It wouldn't be as regularly.
Yeah, 100%.
But
so yeah, starting year 4.
Yeah, for those of you that have been listening, and I don't know how long people have been listening, thank you for tuning in every Friday when they get posted, or whenever you tune in. Thank you very much for all your support. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so ready to go on year number 4.
Yeah, fun times.
Yeah. And I mean, if you wanted to share us around, tell your friends about it. Anyone that you know that also reads the similar books that you do, if you want to share us out, like, we would appreciate it. But
yeah, and you can always touch base with us too, because, like, we're reading a book a month, and, like, we're interested in what you guys want, like, feel about the books too, if you've read them or if you're reading along with us.
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah, let us know. We really like interacting with listeners and readers that like the same stuff we're into. Yeah.
We're always looking for recommendations.
Yeah.
So that we can grow our TBRs, because honestly,
because it's not long enough.
It's impossible.
They're not long enough.
It's impossible to read.
If your TBR is manageable, are you even a reader?
There's no such thing as manageable TBRs.
That's true.
Not a thing.
No.
So yeah, on that note, we're starting a new book this month. So we're doing Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I don't know. I guess the first time that I saw this book was on social media.
Yes.
I actually saw someone post about it, and this is kind of bad, but they posted and they were, like, dissing the cover and saying it was really bad cover. And then the author of the book commented on the reel, because it was on Instagram, and was like, I made the cover myself, like, I did my best. And I just felt so bad for the author. I was like,
yeah,
I don't know. And I don't know if it was one of those situations where, like, it just showed up on the author's feed, or if, like, they had tagged the author, because, like, you can dislike things and it's completely fine, but just don't tag people in it when you dislike it.
Yeah, that's just it's just being hurtful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, honestly, I don't know. Maybe she may not have even tagged the author, but yeah, I was like, oh, that.
Yeah, that hurts.
That sucks.
Yeah. I like the cover. I don't see anything wrong. I do, like, sort of question, like, why. Like, having read the entire book, the sort of whole thing of, like, the silver tier, I'm sort of like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, I understand, like, I get the reference, we'll say.
Yeah. And I guess, like, I hate to always be bringing back everything to misogyny, but I'm going to.
I love it. I love it.
But is it like a
the fact that there's a man crying on the cover?
Yeah.
Like a man showing
is that why
emotion, and that's a problem?
We don't like it because of that. I don't know. I don't mind the cover, but
see, you know what my issue with it was? This book, and why it took me so long to buy it and then read it? Because people kept talking about the guy's name, which is Kingfisher. Which
so many people hate his name.
Really annoyed me. Like, his name is a fish. He has a fish name. And, like,
I honestly,
how is that hot?
I've, like, seen so many people complaining about his name, and I don't mind it. I'm like, yeah, it's a name.
The name of a fish.
Yeah. Well, and then they call him Fisher, so that's even worse.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, I prefer Fisher over Kingfisher.
Oh, yeah?
Because Fisher I've actually heard as a name before.
And not just an occupation.
Yes. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Am I a stereotype?
No, it's just... No, that's fair. Yeah. So, I guess... I'll just say I've never read the book before we started recording. Not before we started recording. Before we started doing it for the podcast. Yeah. I have at least read this week's before we started recording this week. But yeah, but I did, before Christmas, Jeff was like, I never know what kind of books to buy for you. So I sent him like an Amazon wish list with a few books on it. And I was like, here you go. I'll keep this updated so that you can always buy me books based on like
what things
I want.
Yeah.
Normally I just buy it. Like if I want a book, I'll buy it for myself. Yeah. But there are certain books, like this book was on there because I was like, I'd like to read it, but I don't really have the time. So I just put it on there. And then we decided that we wanted to read it for the podcast. So I bought myself a copy. And then Jeff also gave me a copy for Christmas. So I brought one back. It was completely fine. But it was just funny because I was like, yeah, I literally gave him this list and then bought myself a book off of it.
Hilarious.
But anyway, so I only started reading it because of this podcast, but it's really hard to put it down. I will say. I'm enjoying it a lot.
I'll be honest with you. I also, like, really enjoyed it, but I found it quite a little bit tricky to get into, and we'll get into it, and I'll explain why, like, when we're further in. But I found the first third quite sort of, like, just a little bit challenging. Once you get into, like, them in the I'll say just in the third location.
Yeah.
It picks up for me.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely had a bunch of moments where I laid it down and was like, if I wasn't reading it for the podcast, I probably would have, like, left it for a few days because I was like, this character's going to do something and I'm going to be pissed about it and I'm not ready for that level of emotion.
I don't want to be mad at you.
Yeah. And I had a few of those, like, even in the first half of this week, I texted you and I was like, someone's going to do something stupid and I don't want to read about it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But yeah, I also, like, I read it. This is actually my first book of 2025.
Nice.
This was, like, my first read of 2025. I bought it just after Christmas, I took the kids to the bookstore, and I was like, you know what, I'm finally going to do it. So I bought it, started reading it over Christmas break. I'm pretty sure I finished it over Christmas break. And like, yeah, once I got over that little hump of the beginning, and I'm probably not going to find it as slow this time around.
Yes.
Because I sort of know what to expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, be prepared, people, because this is a long book, and we are squeezing it into 4 episodes. We're discussing like 150 pages an episode, so like, this is a 750-page book that we're squeezing into 4 weeks. So
yeah, we maybe should have rethought it, but
it's too late now.
It's too late. It's a good book, so we're doing it.
And if you have not yet read the book or read Quicksilver and you're just listening to us for funsies, I do highly recommend it. It is so good.
Yeah, I'm only at the beginning of it, obviously. I've read past the first week, but I haven't read a whole lot past it. So I'm still not at the 3rd location yet. I'm close though.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to do our heads up. This is not a spoiler-free zone and things might get saucy. They won't. But, you know, here's hoping.
There's some talk.
There is some talk. So just a little bit about Callie Hart before we get started. She is a dark romance writer. She has 10 different series with 51 books total. Like, holy moly.
Which is wild. And I will cut in here and say that this is according to Goodreads. I didn't really want to look too deep into too much because I didn't want to get spoilers. So,
right.
But yeah, that's what Goodreads says. And I know sometimes they like list different editions of books as separate books. So I don't know, but she definitely has like 10 series, which is insane.
That is insane.
And dark romance, we do love dark romance.
We do love a dark romance.
I'm interested in reading more of her books.
Me too.
Now. After I started this one, I'm like, she may be my girl.
Yeah. Well, so this is what she says. Her author bio says that she would not think twice about striking a questionable bargain with a Fey warrior if the opportunity arose. And like, we are both. Yes. Yep.
100%.
So Quicksilver is the first book in the Fae and Alchemy series. The second book is called Brimstone and is set to release November 18th, 2025. So we have 1,000,000 years to wait.
It's gonna fucking fly by, though. Like, Jesus.
I guess. So.
But it is, like, I didn't actually look. Do you know if there's gonna be more than 2 books? Is it like a full-on series?
Yes. I thought there was, I don't know. I don't remember.
Is it a trilogy or I didn't even think to look it up. I'm just curious now.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
It's a projected trilogy.
Okay.
So we'll have hopefully 3 books at least.
I'm not upset at 3 books.
I'm not either.
And like, my favorite series is a bajillion books, but it's a lot. And especially as they're coming out.
Yeah. It's an undertaking.
Yeah. Yeah. But trilogy, love good trilogy.
Yeah. So this week we are reading chapters 1 to 11. So the first little bit is definitely going to be a lot of world building, so forgive me. But we start with somebody telling somebody else that there's no need for all this violence. And then we get a rule that if you lie to a guardian, it means death. And that last year, our narrator, who we don't know who they are yet, watched one of the Queen's guardians in their gold armor gut a neighbor for lying about his age. And even before that, the narrator watched the guardians slit their mother's throat in the middle of the street. So already we are getting sort of this very, like, brutal, like, it's a very brutal place. And then the guard puts his hands around the narrator's throat and asks their name, age, and ward number. And then says, and tacks it on at the end for our benefit, lower tier citizens aren't allowed in the hub. And then we get that this setting is a city called Zilvarin. There actually is a pronunciation guide in the beginning of the book, which is very helpful, and I love it. It's nice.
I struggle with them, so I was just like, cool, and bypass.
I wish that they told us where to put the emphasis. Because, like, it's something to break up the syllables so that you know how to pronounce it. But, like, where are we putting the emphasis? Like, which syllable gets the emphasis? That was sort of my only,
Yeah. Yeah. I have listened to some of the audiobooks, so, like, some of the words, I'm assuming this is correct, but...
Right.
Also, I forget a lot of things, so I'm not overly helpful.
So they live in Zilvarin, and it's shaped like a wheel, and there are spokes in the wheel, and these spokes are walls, and they are designed to keep citizens contained in their section. And I believe from what, like, we've read and sort of what I've inferred is that people from the other sections can go between. Like, maybe not commonly, but, like, you can, like, travel throughout the city for the most part. So she sort of claps back with sass, our narrator. It is a she. We don't know that yet, but, like, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, as I think in the last 3 years, maybe 100% of our books have been female main characters and female writers.
Yep.
There's been a few that have had different points of view, I guess. But yeah, we're heavy on the female main characters.
True story. Anyway, so she claps back with sass, and the guard sort of threatens her with time in prison, and that sort of, like, legit scares her, because she's like, I was in there once before for stealing, and I was in there for 8 minutes, and it was so hot, and there was such a stench that, like, that was long enough. And
wild. 8 minutes.
And there's also a little bit of a reference to, like, the setting is interesting in that it is, like, a proverbial desert. There's sand everywhere, so, like, people wear scarves around their faces so that they're not, like, inhaling sand. They have 2 suns, which is, like, really cool, but also, like, makes it exceptionally hot all the time. So, like, obviously think about it. If people are in a prison and they're, like, vomiting and they're pooping and they're pissing and, like, it's gonna be foul.
It reminds me a bit of Star Wars, like Tatooine.
Yeah.
Don't they have 2 suns? Am I crazy?
No, I think so. Anyway, so then she sort of tells him, okay, like, I'll tell you my info. So she tells him her name is Lisa Fosick. She's 24, single, and then she, like, winks. And then says she's from the 3rd ward. But then she tells the reader, Lisa Fosick is not her real name, but she's not stupid enough to, like, give this guard her real name. Like, that's dumb.
I completely forgot this name.
Wait,
which is funny.
Is it?
Well, just, like, it's the first time we get a name for her. I could see it sticking for somebody, but I don't even remember her giving a fake name.
It is funny, and near the end of my section, I will bring up again why it's funny. Okay. So she's got dark hair and blue eyes, and says that that's fairly uncommon in their city. So, like, she says that he will remember her face.
That's not good.
No, it's not. And the guard just is shocked that she's from the 3rd ward, because apparently they are quarantined and not allowed to leave their section, their ward.
Spoke.
Their spoke. And no one has ever left. So he's like, I don't even know what he doesn't say it, but she's like, I don't even know what the punishment would be because no one's ever done it before.
Well, like,
and I'm assuming it's just no one's ever been caught doing it before.
Yeah. But if lying to them is death, then I'm like, well, I think I know what the punishment for this is as well.
Yeah. I don't understand why she would say where she's... Like, I guess I kind of understand why she's telling him where she's from. But knowing what's about to happen, I think it was really dumb of her to tell him where she was from.
Yeah.
So, the guard then sort of looks scared because, again, as he just said, she's supposed to be quarantined, and he carries a plague bag on his hip.
Belt.
Yes, belt. And Lisa, that's all we know to call her, knows that he's a believer of Madra, and I'm like, of course he is. He works for her. Like, I don't really understand why having a plague bag means he believes in the queen. The way she says it there makes it seem like Madra's like a goddess or something.
Yeah, and it kind of comes up again in my section where she kind of explains what's in these bags and stuff.
Okay.
So, but at this point I was like, who the fuck is Madra? What the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
As I am with any book that I start that's a fantasy, and there's like so much happening.
You gotta figure out the world building.
Yeah.
So he kicks her down then, and like she's thinking to herself that like she knows how to take a beating, but like she has somewhere to be. She has a deal to make. So she like puts tears in her eyes and she begs him not to send her back there, and that her whole family has the rattles. And then she coughs for dramatic effect, and she's like, I don't even think this guy knows what the rattles are or has ever seen someone with the rattles. But, like, she's just, like, literally being like, please, sir, I got the black lung. Like, essentially.
I love her already.
Yeah.
Immediate love.
And then he points his sword, like, right at her. Like, right between her boobs, obviously, because where else is it gonna go?
Yeah.
But then, like she thought he would, he sort of calculates, like, he's sort of, like, thinking in his head. So, initially, he is prepared to, like, stab her and kill her, but then she's looking at him and sees him thinking. Like, she can see the wheels turning. Mm-hmm. And she just admits to us that, like, if they were in any other spoke, in any other ward, he would just kill her where she kneels, I guess, and then just be on his way. However, things were different in the hub. Like, this is sort of the capital ward, like the capital section. It's where the queen lives. It's where everybody is really rich and fancy. So, like,
it reminds me of Hunger Games.
Yes, it is very Hunger Games reminiscent.
Like, the spokes are the different districts.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Which, like, no shade on the author.
No, God, no. It's a genius idea.
Yeah.
See, do you know what brought to mind for me, for some reason, France. Or Paris, really. Because there's the arrondissement.
Yeah.
There's all, like...
That's... Yeah. There's literally, like, that circle, yeah.
But... No, Hunger Games is 100% accurate, too. So, because they're in the hub, it's well kept and really picturesque and, like, fancy, and there's trees, and, like, they work really hard at keeping it pristine. So, if he kills her, he's obviously gonna have to move her body. Whereas in other wards, he would just leave her where she lies, and she would just decompose in the streets.
In the two suns.
Yeah. No, I guess mummify? Like, would she dry out?
Well, I think she literally talks about seeing, like, white bones on the side. So it literally, like...
Yeah.
Strips your skin off. Can't smell good. I'm gonna tell you that.
No. So, you know, I guess it's quite troubling that this is where they live. Anyway, so... Obviously, if he kills her here, he would have to move her body. and he doesn't want to risk getting whatever diseases he thinks she may have, being from the Third Ward. So then he's freaking out that he touched her because he grabbed her by the throat in the beginning. So he takes off his gauntlet, which is made of gold, and drops it on the ground.
Wild choice.
Yeah. Because
you can just hand sanitize
I know,
that.
because he thinks she's contagious. And I'm like, you think that whatever she has is going to go through metal onto your skin?
Yeah.
Dude, be like normal. Come on.
Be reasonable. Yeah.
So then she tells us that he originally caught her lifting a small piece of iron from a stall, which is, that would have earned, like, the reason she did that was to get a little bit of a profit. But now she's looking at this golden gauntlet instead. And it's like she doesn't even think. She just grabs it and runs. And, like, the guard obviously chases her.
Well, she was already going to be probably killed anyway, so it's like, you may as well go for the big prize.
Yeah, because I guess she broke several laws. Like, 1, he caught her stealing. 2, she's not supposed to be out of her ward. And so might as well go for the trifecta. So, obviously the guard chases her. And then we hear, like, from her brain that the guards are, like, highly trained. They do an 18-month program. They're essentially tortured that entire time and taught to withstand, like, everything. They're taught every sort of fighting style, so that they are really an elite force. And so she says that they're almost undefeatable.
Yeah. It's like, but why would you want to be what?
Yeah. I don't know why you'd want to go through all that training, but, like, I guess it's a high honor to be one of the elite guard.
I guess.
Yeah. But she also knows that he's wearing, like, a full golden, like, armored set right now. So obviously that's heavy, and it's hot out, because they're in a fucking desert, so he can't really chase her, and he can't really go where she's going. So she gets to a wall, and she starts to climb it. And I don't understand why he can't just go out the nearest door, and, like...
Are there no doors?
Well, there
have to be gates.
Yeah. Why can't he just go to the nearest gate and meet her on the other side?
Maybe they're locked?
But he would have a key. He's a guard.
Yeah, but not all guards get locks. That would be
maybe,
silly.
But he could say to the guy, maybe there's a guy waiting by and say, hey, this girl over there is climbing the wall. Meet her on the other side and get her.
Would be smart, but...
He doesn't. He just watches her and starts cursing her out and yelling at her.
Stupid.
Yeah. So she starts to climb, and initially she's wearing the gauntlet, and she's like, this is challenging. She's like, I'm probably gonna have to drop this in order to climb away successfully.
Which, honestly, would have been... Imagine her life if she did drop it.
Very different. But she then thought that the gauntlet could literally pay for her brother's education, 3 years worth of food, and tickets out of Zilverin, and, like, still enough left over for them to buy a little house. So, like, she's like, no way am I dropping this thing. So the guard is at the base of the wall yelling at her to give it up and drop the gauntlet, and, like, she can, like, sort of hear and knows that for him to lose this gauntlet, there will be consequences for him as well. For losing this piece of armor that is very expensive. Like, can you imagine, like, there are people literally, like, dead in the streets, and the queen is putting all of her guards in gold. Like, how frivolous and wasteful is that?
It does make me wonder, like, obviously I haven't finished the book, but it makes me wonder if, like, is it repellent of some kind of, like...
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Like, I obviously have no idea, but, like, is there an actual reason for it? Or is it just a show of, I'm fucking rich, I'll do what I want?
Good point. I don't know. Well, I do know, but I'm not saying anything. Because
you love me and I hate spoilers.
So, she keeps climbing. The wall is, like, precarious, and she's struggling to find pieces that'll hold her. And the guard reminds her that, like, even if she makes it up the wall, there's no fence that will get rid of the gauntlet, because whoever has it is, like, dead. So, like, nobody's gonna buy it off of her, and nobody has the money to buy it off her, essentially. And, like, she's thinking in her head, like, he's right. Like, no one in Zilverin would dare steal armor, and therefore, like, she's not gonna be able to find anybody to buy it from her. But, like, she's gonna have to try anyways. And, like...
Yeah, at this point, she's too far in to give up.
And then he even offers, like, I won't chase you anymore, just drop it, and we'll leave it alone. Like, you'll never see me again, sort of a thing. But she's thinking in her head, like, that's a really big lie. Like, he's not gonna leave her alone. Yeah. And she just makes it to the top, and then she hears the gold, like, she has a moment where the gold comes alive and starts speaking to her, saying she sees us, she feels us, and repeats that a couple of times. And she's like, no, this can't happen right now, and then she slams her hand on top of the gauntlet, and it stops talking. But it's more like a hum, and it's, like, in her head. Like, she's the only one that can hear it. It's not, like, magic gold that everybody can hear. It's literally just for her.
Yeah. But it was confusing. I was like, what is happening here?
For sure. And then the guard tells her to drop the gauntlet or make an enemy for life. So she's like, oh, well, he's panicking. But she doesn't care.
Does he come back? Sorry.
I don't think so.
I guess he could be. There's a trilogy, so we don't...
But also, like, she thinks he's gonna get punished, so...
Yes, that's true.
You know, he could very well die for this, for letting someone have his gauntlet, so...
Yeah.
So her plan is to melt the gauntlet down and sell the, I guess, like, gold ingots or gold, like, coins or something.
Yeah. Smart.
Really. It is.
If you have the ability to melt it down somehow.
Well,
then.
So the next thing we get to, we get a little bit of a jump, is someone named Elroy telling her no. Not in his furnace, and essentially like, no, get rid of it, you're not doing that in my furnace, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, I had nowhere else to bring it. So she said her plan was to melt it down. I guess she has a furnace capable of doing it, but this guy Elroy is like, no way. And then she thinks that, like, she couldn't bring it to where she's staying right now because her and her brother Hayden have actually been sleeping above a tavern called the Mirage for the last 6 weeks in secret. So what they do is they creep in after dark and sleep, like, among the cockroaches and, like, the moldy boxes and crates and stuff. But I know, it's disgusting, but she knows that, like, this isn't a permanent situation. Like, she's not paying rent, like, they don't have the money to live in a home.
If they find her, then they're fucked.
Yeah, so, like, she says that she knows that eventually they are going to find out that her and Hayden are sleeping in the attic. So, like, eventually they're going to be kicked out and not allowed back in. Mm-hmm. So she can't leave anything there because any day they could find her and be like, well, no, get the fuck out. You're not allowed in our attic. So, like, she can't leave any stuff there. So she didn't want to leave the gauntlet there.
Yeah.
But she just said, like, it's not like she really has any stuff. All they have is the clothes on their backs. Which to me is wild.
Oh, 100%.
And then Elroy tells her that she's stupid, that she has brought Madra's guards down on them, and that by even allowing the gauntlet into his shop, they will take his hands. And he's like, how am I supposed to work without hands? And then we get that Elroy is a glass maker, and he's the best in Zilverin, but only those in the hub can afford windows. So, like, here's what I don't understand, and they didn't really get into it. So, like, did Elroy supply glass to the hub? Like, and I know you don't really know because if I,
No.
but like these are questions that I like. They're saying he's the best, but he's quarantined in the third ward. So like, do people come and buy things for him for the hub? And so like, does he actually have money? Or are they saying he's the best in Zelverin, but no one sort of knows his hidden talent?
I took it as he was the best and they buy it from him, but like,
I don't know. If he was the best glassmaker in the city, why would, like, you would think that he would be paid enough where he could, like, make some friends with someone and, like, get out of the third ward and settle somewhere else.
Is he just, like, so old that he just wants to live out his life with his little forge and is like, I'm making money?
Maybe.
I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point. We don't know if it's, like, is the narrator just saying, he's the best, and that's, like, where we are. Because it could easily be that, too.
Yeah. So our narrator tells us that he actually used to make weapons for rebels, but, like, the rebellion has sort of gone quiet lately, and he's sort of given up his rebellious ways and sort of has gone on the straight and narrow anyway. So,
not good.
Yeah, so he does.
Never good to give up your rebellious ways.
Yes.
Not to go on a rant about the world, but
yes,
everyone should rebel.
Yeah. Well, not everyone.
Well, yeah. Everyone probably listening to this podcast. I feel like if you're reading these fantasy books and if you're listening to two women talk about fantasy books, you probably
don't want another Handmaid's Tale situation. I say another right? As if it's history and that it happened.
Well, it has happened to, like, Black women that, like, before. So it has happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You know. Sorry.
So,
it's a hard life to live in and not to bring up. Because, like, it's so hard to not talk about all of the bullshit you hear and to not be consumed by it. And then you're reading books that are mostly about, like, rebelling against societies. And you're like, we're turning into one of those societies. That's wild.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Not to get depressing or anything.
You know.
So we learn now that the third ward is obviously a very rough place, and we could sort of figure that out anyway.
Yeah.
But, Saeris, we don't know that yet. We're gonna find out in a hot minute. Our narrator tells us that there's no fresh food available, and that the only way to survive is through barter and trade, or by turning someone into guardians. So, like, if you see your neighbor breaking the law, you can go to the guardians and tell them, and they'll reward you in some way, whether, I don't know if it's monetary or with, like, food itself.
Yeah.
And our narrator just says, like, if you're not dead or dying, you're hungry. And then she tells us her connection to Elroy, like, he has been in her life for years, and he was in love with her mother. And her death sort of, like, really hurt him deeply. And he has, like, she said that when she was a kid, he was, like, larger than life and really big and strong and whatever. But she says that, like, since her mom's death, he has slowly, like, turned into a shadow of himself. And, like, he seems very cynical now and very much like, we're not going to get involved in anything. Let's just live our lives. And, like, he doesn't see the point in, like, getting involved in things anymore.
Yeah.
So he asks her to take the gauntlet back. Sort of like, just go back to the hub, throw it over the wall, leave it there. Like, he just doesn't want it in his forge. And that
maybe they won't murder you.
Well, I guess he's thinking, like, if they can't find it anywhere, then they can't pin it on anyone.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
No.
It's like the only real option that's available.
Yeah.
Other than what happens.
Yeah. So he then calls her by her name. So we're learning her actual name is Saeris. But like in her brain, she tells him, she's like, she can't bring it back. She doesn't want to keep living like this. So like, I guess she's sick of surviving. She wants to thrive.
Yeah.
And essentially she just says that like Madra is the worst. And like during hard years when there are like droughts and when there's a scarcity of food, like she will never divert any food from the hub. So like people die all the time. So like the richest citizens are having these lavish parties and copious amounts of food and water, and like they're suffering and living in squalor, and she can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And she just says like Elroy seems to have given up. And he just tells her like he knows that she's angry and wants to fight like he did, but this city just causes pain and misery and suffering, and Madra has ruled for 1,000 years and nothing is going to change. So like
a wild amount
of time. So these are all human people, and Madra is apparently also a human woman, but apparently she has ruled for 1,000 years. So this is sort of another mystery for us to get revealed, like, as we read, right? Is trying to figure out, well, if she is 1,000, how? Just how?
How now?
A part of me was, like, wondering, like, when I first read this book, I was like, especially in the next chapter when she, like, when we meet the queen, a part of me was like, maybe it's because I sort of had recently seen Wicked or something, because I was like, maybe she's like a robot, or like I was thinking like sort of like how the wizard is, you know, tricking people into thinking he's like a big giant head when he's not. I was thinking like, well, maybe she's like tricking people by, maybe it's like an entity, like a ghost, or I don't know. I was just thinking it was like...
So we do find it out. This book, I guess.
I don't know. It's something for us to stew over.
I will stew over it.
And then, so I guess Elroy asks, like, what if they track you down and discover, like, what you can do with metal? And then Saeris is like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's a parlor trick. It's not a big deal. But in her head, she's like, it is a big deal. Because, like, she's like, she talks about how she, not talks, but thinks about how she can actually manipulate metal. And that it, like, it vibrates and it seems to, like, sing and talk around her. And
interesting.
Yes. It is very interesting. And Elroy just asks her to return it and, like, chill out. For Hayden. He doesn't say chill out. I'm saying chill out.
No, I love it. I liked it a lot.
And just says, like, he's still innocent and he's not cynical yet. And I'm just like, how old is this boy?
I can't get behind him. I know I haven't read a lot of the book, but I fucking cannot stand him already.
Yeah.
I don't know if he gets better. I don't know what happens. But I'm not here for whatever it is that he's doing.
Yeah. Okay, so according to the wiki, he is 20.
How old is she?
24.
Yeah.
So, I guess this is sort of my issue. The fact that he's still innocent at 20. Like, dude, you better, like, I don't want to say man up, but, like, person up.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be getting taken care of anymore.
Yeah, especially since, like, she has had to. So,
Anyway, she tells Elroy, essentially, that everything she does is for Hayden, and then she leaves. She goes to find Hayden, and she does find him in front of the House of Kala, which is a tavern, like, the only tavern in town in the ward, that lets you barter for food or drink.
Which is nice.
Or you can gamble for it. Like, there's always card games and stuff going on there, so you can gamble for things and then use that stuff in the tavern. And she says that, like, he really likes to gamble, he likes to find trouble, so she knew she would find him there.
He's innocent.
Yeah, he's an immature ass, essentially, is what I'm getting.
Yeah, he's not, like, innocent is not the right word. You're not gambling away everything as an innocent man.
Yeah.
You're
not taking responsibility for your shit.
Yeah. And, like, I do blame her a tiny bit for babying him.
For sure.
So.
Anyway, so she sees that he's, like, been beat up and he's been thrown out into the sand. And she immediately knows that it was Carrion, which is a terrible name for a person.
Yeah, I was thinking that today. I was like, that can't be right.
Like,
and then I was like, oh, no, it
Carrion is like dead, rotting meat.
Yes.
That's a terrible name.
Yep.
Anyway, she tells her brother she thought he would know better than to mix it himself up with him again. So, like, seems like Carrion, like, beat him up pretty solidly.
Yeah.
And Hayden's like, oh, I thought you would, like, feel bad for me, or something like that. Or, like, oh, I thought you would, like, feel sorry for me. Like, he beat me up. Can't believe you're, like, instead of her, like, being like, I can't believe you mixed yourself up with him again. He's like, oh, I can't believe you're doing...
You should feel bad for me.
Anyway, so she heads inside to deal with Carrion herself. And, like, Hayden he gets up and follows her in. And she's pissed because she gave Hayden money to buy water, and he gambled that away, along with his scarf that he uses to protect his face. And I'm just like, dude can't even be trusted to buy fucking water?
When it's, like, a necessity.
Yeah, they live in the fucking
literally
desert.
Die.
They live in the fucking desert, and he can't buy...
Like, even his scarf is a fucking necessity.
Ugh.
God. I don't know if we're supposed to hate him as much as I do, but...
Yeah,
fuck.
I know.
Like, if we aren't supposed to hate him...
Bad job.
Yeah.
Can I be honest, though, and say that her actions towards her brother and her reactions towards her brother is actually one of the key reasons why I put this book down as often as I did in the first little bit. And actually...
literally, what I texted you, the only things I've texted you about is him.
So, like, this whole thing about the third location is sort of when she cools her jets a bit. And that's why... Because she's so single-minded about her brother. And in my head, I just want to be like...
Why?
Like, I get it. He's your brother. You love him. But at the same time...
He's a mediocre man.
Yes!
At best.
Anyway.
It's the reason that I've put the book down, too. Is because I'm like, he's gonna do something stupid. Or, I don't want to read about that.
But, like, it's not even just him. It's how she reacts to him.
Yes.
So, and we'll get more into it in a little bit, but, like, yeah, that is sort of, I find her singular-mindedness about her crappy brother annoying.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, so she heads inside, and then we get a little bit of backstory on Carrion. His name is Carrion Swift, and he is the most notorious gambler and cheat in the city, and also apparently really good in bed.
I do, like, as much as we always talk about the Virgin, I now need to say that I do appreciate that she's slept with other people before in this book. Love it. Big fan.
She said he was the only one that's made her scream. And in my head, I'm like, so have you tried with other people and he's the only one that's done the job, or is he the only one?
Oh.
You know what I mean?
I think she's tried with other people and he's the only one.
Okay. Because
there's foreshadowing in the next part.
Okay.
That I think is my section about screaming.
Okay. So the proprietor of the tavern approaches them and she's like, I don't want any fights. Hayden, get out of here.
I love her. Based on nothing, I love her.
And she, like, kicks Hayden out. She's like, you're on a 24-hour ban. Get out. But Hayden wants his scarf. So Saeris is like, you go outside. Wait out there. I'll be out in 10 minutes. I'll deal with it. And she gives him the gauntlet that is in her bag.
The worst thing she's ever done in her entire life.
But also, she doesn't want the gauntlet close to Carrion because he is not trustworthy.
I understand.
He's a rapscallion.
But it would have been better if she kept it. I do understand why she did it, and, like, obviously, I'm never going to be in that situation, so I can't say what I would do, but god damn.
Yeah, I know.
Terrible choice.
I know. Anyway, so she just says, don't let the bag out of your sight, but I also think she says, like, don't look at it.
Yeah, probably.
And she sends him out the door. Then she approaches...
Idiot.
Yeah, a huge idiot. So she approaches Carrion then, who has, like, self-confidence, and he's got a swagger, and, like, all that. And that's actually what made her sleep with him in the first place, because she wanted to prove... Like, she almost... I guess he walked around with such, like, a confidence that he was the man, and she was like, he can't be that good. And then, turns out he was.
Which I like it. It makes me laugh. He seems less shitty than her brother.
Yes. Yeah, he does.
Which is sad for her.
So, like, that was the last time she saw him, was when she was getting out of his bed. And he had told her, he was like, you'll be back. And she was like, nope.
Don't love that. I'm like, fuck
Yeah.
you. Don't, if a guy ever told me getting out of his bed that I'd be back, I'd be like, well, now, immediately, never.
And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, if a woman really wanted an orgasm, she could figure it out on her own.
100%. 100%.
Anyway, she goes up to him and she says, like, he wasn't supposed to mess with her brother anymore. They had a deal. And he was like, I did play with him, you're right, but he wanted to keep playing, and I didn't, and he wouldn't take no for an answer, and that's why I beat him up. Like, and he said he tried to stab him when he said, like, the brother, Hayden, tried to stab Carrion when Carrion refused to play anymore.
Which is like, why?
So, like, again, Hayden just seems like a piece of shit.
100%. Didn't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. Like, we're supposed to get behind this person in any way? Hard pass.
Mm-hmm. And they're like talking, and he's flirting with her, and like he's like, have a drink with me, and she's like, ew, no, pass. And he's like, how about if you have a drink with me, I'll give you back the scarf / mask that I won off your brother, and the, like, I'll give it back. And she's like, fine, but you also have to give back the money and an extra $5 for the inconvenience of me having to sit with you.
Love it. She's an icon, and I love her.
And he's like, fine. So, like, a part of me wonders, like, does he actually, like, have a thing for her, or is this, like...
It feels like he must.
Because, like, he just seems like he's flirting with her all the time, and he keeps reminding, like, oh, remember that night that we were together, like... And it just seems very much like he's, like, or unless it's one of those things where, like, he just wants what he can't have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because she thinks he's the absolute piece of shit, he wants her more.
Yeah. And so I go into all of my books blind because that's how I like it. But I was like, is he the person that she's gonna end up with? Like,
yeah.
There's so many people in this story that, like, if you're going in blind, I didn't even know really the person's name.
Yeah.
So I was like,
is this the MMC?
Yeah, is this him? And then, like, later there's another instance of, is this him? And it's like, could be any of these people.
So he tries to, like, keep flirting with her, but he, like, pours her a big old drink and they sit together, and, like, he's trying to flirt, but she's just like, dude, I know that you're not giving me $5 extra and, like, all my money back, plus the scarf, just to have a drink with me. Like, you want something, so just, like, you want to talk about something, like, get it over with.
I love that she knows that.
And he's just like, oh, I can't believe that you don't think I just want your company. But then he says, actually, there is something. He says, I heard that somebody was stupid and stole a gauntlet from a guard and was even more stupid to bring it back to our ward.
How did he hear
I don't
that?
know, but she's like,
Wild.
she's just like, oh, I don't know what that's about. I never heard of that. And he's like, I wonder, I just want to know if this person put it somewhere safe, aka not here in the ward, because the guards are going to rain hell on them to get it, on the ward to get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, like, I have a warehouse in the second ward, and that could be a place where we keep the gauntlet safe. And this is what I don't understand. So, like, if everybody is quarantined in the third ward, how does he get in and out to the second ward?
I don't really get it.
And, like, it's legit. Like, he legit has a warehouse out there, and he can go there and then get back.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It doesn't,
but it's fine. But, like, obviously she doesn't trust him. She's like, there's no way. And then she sort of forgets herself and says, there's no way I'm giving you that gauntlet. And sort of...
And he's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, he's like, shit, you actually do have it. And then he just says, he's like, listen, I'm only offering you a safe place outside the ward. He's like, I don't care where you store it. Just get it out of our ward, away from our people.
Yeah.
And, like, she sort of realizes that he actually does care about the people in the ward. And that she's probably been a bit selfish to bring it back, knowing what's gonna happen.
Yeah. I will say, it's like, oh, he cares about the people. Or does he just care about himself and the people he, like...
I mean, maybe.
Yeah. He's not scot-free here.
No.
He's not like...
No, he's not like a knight in shining armor sort of a person. He's definitely got his own interests. Apparently his grandmother lives in Ward 3, and that's why he still lives in the third ward instead of living in the second, because he's taking care of his grandma.
It's like, couldn't you just move her to your warehouse too? Store her there.
Yeah, that's true. So she sort of says, okay, fine, like, I'll figure something out, finishes her drink and goes outside. Thinking in her head, I'll move it somewhere. But when she gets outside, Hayden is gone. Because he's an idiot and couldn't wait for her like she instructed.
This is literally where I stopped reading. I was like, if we weren't doing it for a podcast, I laid it down here and I was like, I will never pick this up. Obviously I did, but I did think that. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, no, it's bad. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
So she's panicking because she's thinking, like, maybe he was sick of waiting and just went back to the Mirage. But then she's like, shit, what if he looked at it? What if he looked in the bag and decided to, like, go off on his own and do things with it?
His own
fault.
Let him die.
So essentially she's like, anything could have fucking happened. So she starts to run around, and it's still daylight at this point. Like, the suns are beating down.
Well, it's never not daylight.
It's never not daylight? Oh, I didn't.
Because she's never
caught
she's
that.
never seen. Yeah.
Anyway, so, like, the suns are beating down. It's hot, and she realizes that she's super thirsty. She hasn't had any water today. And she mentions that she left her water ration at the Mirage. So, like...
Which is a funny place to leave your water ration, at the Mirage. Because of deserts and,
but, like...
Sorry.
It's funny. It's just the first mention that she gets a ration of water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's planting that in our heads. But, like, she's starting to panic because she doesn't know where her brother is. And she is running down, like, she's running through the alleys and through the streets. And she discusses, like, a couple of people in the wards. Primarily, this peddler who sells metal that contains traces of magic. And she's like, not really. He's a snake oil salesman, so, like, he sells stuff that is supposed to have magic in it, but it doesn't. He's just a shyster. Yeah. And then we learn that humans used to have magic gifts, like reading minds or eternal luck, or, like, being able to boil someone's blood inside their body. But those gifts have been gone for, like, hundreds of years. And he also, like, he sells, like, little, potions that are, like, the fountain of eternal life. That's how Madra's been in power for 1,000 years. You have yours, too. So, like,
yeah,
he's just selling, like, stupid things.
Yeah.
But, so his name is Shaw, or Shoss, or something like that. And she said that, like, he also will occasionally buy, well, not occasionally, he'll buy rare artifacts from people. So she's really worried that Hayden went to him to sell the gauntlet, because he's also, like, a stab in the back. Like, he will, as soon as turn on you and steal your shit, then, like, he'll stab you, steal your shit, and keep it for himself. So, like, he's not a trustworthy person to sell this gauntlet to.
Yeah. Well, nobody is.
Well,
already,
yes.
Like, kind of. Yeah.
So she's just stressed that that's where Hayden went. And then she hears a scream from the direction of the mirage and, like, heads towards it. And all of a sudden, guardians show up behind her. And, like, there's a fuck ton of them. And they order her to stop. But she's like, nope, I need to get to my brother. So she keeps running. And they're all like, you're not, stop. We order you to stop. And she just doesn't.
Yeah.
So then, which is, like, in and of itself a dangerous thing to do. Because if we remember at the beginning, she's like, I saw someone get gutted for lying about their age. So, like, her just disobeying a direct order could be really bad for her. So she gets to the Mirage and sees there are around 30 guards, all in gold, with their swords pointed right at Hayden.
Great.
Yeah.
Good job.
And she's, like, freaking out in her head, because, like, obviously there's no getting around the 30 guards that are there, and then the at least 10 that are behind her. So they order Hayden to hand over the gauntlet, and she knows that if he hands it over, they're going to arrest him. But if he doesn't hand it over, they'll just all rush him and kill him. So, like, it's really a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew that, like, this is her mistake, so she has to get him out of this. She bears that responsibility.
Yeah. Which, like, I don't actually blame him as much for this as everything else.
No. Like, it's funny because at first she's like, why did that idiot look in the bag? Why did that idiot leave?
Well, yes.
She's trying to blame it on him, but then she's like, wait, I brought this here. This is on me.
Yeah.
And so the captain, who is with them, approaches Hayden, and she sees in Hayden's eyes that he's, like, really scared. And he looks at Saeris, and he tells her he's sorry. And she can see that, like, he's gonna run. And she yells at everybody to stop. And the captain just tells her to go mind her business. And she admits that her brother didn't do anything wrong. That the bag and the armor in it was hers, and that she stole it. Then Hayden also tries to say, no, he stole it. And obviously the captain doesn't really know what's going on, so just decides to restrain Saeris just to figure it out. Which sort of turns on her fight or flight, but it's her fight, not flight. Because she's like, they are not restraining me. And she grabs a blade that she tucked in her boot. She plans to fight back. And she knows that holding a blade up to a guard meant death. So, like, in her mind, her life is forfeit now.
Yeah.
And they're all sort of giggling at her, like, oh, you're gonna fight us with that thing? Like, you're gonna, so...
You're just a girl.
Yeah, so the captain is like, oh, we got a feisty one, boys. Like, let's see what she has. And then he sicks 3 guards on her. And she reveals to the reader that the rebels her mom worked with actually trained her so she can fight. Which is
I did kind of think that one of these guards might be
The guy?
The guy. I was literally every guy that showed up, I was like, is this him? Is this him? But I thought, because they say, like, one of them is, like, quiet and better than the others. And I'm like,
it's him.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
He's gonna,
I will say, though, like, it's funny, because at the beginning, when she's describing the training that all the guards go through, and she's like, they're undefeatable. And now she's, like, just gonna fight 3 of them at once, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. And destroy them.
Yeah. So she fights all 3 of them. She slits one guy's throat, like, almost immediately, and, like, leaves him to bleed out. Then she grabs his sword and cuts off another guy's hand, which is wild that she just cut off his limb. And, like, she was in the killing fury. The killing, and she's thinking, like, these people killed her mom, killed Elroy's family, killed her friends, and now they're coming for her brother, and, like, that shit ain't gonna happen. So, as you said, the 3rd guard is, like, more quiet and better than the rest. He gets involved then, and, like, he's really good, and it makes it seem like he's winning and confident, but then she reveals that she was holding back, and so she stops.
Love it.
And he's like, oh shit. And he actually says, oh shit. And she's like, I could toy with him a little more, but I won't. I'll make this quick and painless. So she, like, rolls and goes in between his legs and slices his, I think it's the femoral artery. The leg.
I didn't know if it was that, or is it Achilles tendon?
No, it was, like, the artery in your thigh that, one that if you slice it, you bleed out in, like, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So, slice that. And he just drops dead. And the captain sees it, and he's like, I underestimated you, but, like, now I can tell you were definitely the one that stole the gauntlet. And her brother is, like, looking and is like, run, he's like, you should run. And she's like, surrounded by still 40 guards-ish. And then they actually leave Hayden alone and grab her. And she just tells Hayden to find the old man, aka Elroy, but she doesn't want to say Elroy's name because that'll, she wants to make them not be able to find him again. And he doesn't want to go, but she gets mad at him and tells him to, like, do what he's told for once, and she doesn't want or need him following her around blubbering like a brat. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize I was such a burden to you. And she's like, well, you are. Your whole life you've been a burden, and don't come looking for me. And it's like, he actually thought she was telling the truth. He was like, oh. And he leaves.
I'm a man with a sad ego. I'm a mad.
Yeah. Like, it's so obvious that she just wants him to be safe.
Yeah.
That, like, I'm shook that he actually believed it. Yeah. It was really annoying.
100%.
So, they take her to the palace, obviously. And she discusses how, like, she dreamed of being chosen as one of Madra's ladies-in-waiting when she was a kid and, like, when she was a teenager, because she wanted to be, like, lifted out of poverty, but she thinks it's, like, funny that now she's gonna meet the queen, but in a prison cell, like, she's waiting as a captive. So, the captain comes to get her, and we learn that his name is Captain Heron. And Queen Madra is actually, like, meeting with her personally, which is wild.
Yeah.
So Heron walks her through the palace, but she's, like, really unsteady. So we learn that she was waiting in the cell for, like, 6 hours. So he finally shoves a water canteen at her to drink. And that opens up a conversation about water. And she just tells him, like, you get your water from a tap, because he's like, don't drink all my water. And she's like, oh, wow, you'll just have to refill it from a tap. How inconvenient. And she says, do you know how much water we get every day from the 3rd ward? And he says, like, no. And she's like, we get 6 ounces of water a day. Like, that is how much they get.
Yeah.
And she says, their water reservoir is essentially runoff from the hub. And I don't really know what they mean by runoff. I'm sort of afraid to know. Because Heron replies that there's a filtration system, but she's like, there's a grate that catches the solids. So I'm like, when they say runoff, do they mean runoff from them showering and bathing? Or is it runoff from them washing their dishes and food waste that is catching in the grate? Or are we talking like sewage?
Yeah, or it could be runoff from, like, rainwater, too. So, like, it catches solid, like, debris that's on the street and trash. Or it literally could be sewage. Yeah. But, like, they'd all be dead.
But they are all dying.
Yeah,
but, like, you don't die from drinking pee.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it means. I think that's the point.
I guess. Anyway, she also tells...
But my immediate thought was, yes, they are drinking piss.
So, she tells him that people think that the third ward is contagious and infected, but, like, realistically, they are being slowly poisoned because they don't matter and because they ask questions. So, like, it makes me wonder, like, is being put in the third ward a punishment?
Yeah.
Like, if you're rebellious, do you automatically get shoved in there?
Which is realistic because, like, her mother was killed for being a rebel. Yeah.
And she also thinks about how the only reason, like, because he says, well, you look to be doing okay, so it can't be that bad. Essentially, that's his comeback. And she thinks, like, that only reason she is as healthy as she is because she's been siphoning water from the hub reservoir, like stealing it to survive. But she doesn't want to say that to him because, like, Elroy and her brother and, like, others are still doing that. So she can't reveal that or else they won't have a source of water.
Yeah.
And then he tells her that he isn't paid to ask questions.
Good. Great. That's what we love in...
Yeah. And then she agrees and tells him that her people aren't diseased, but there is dissent, like an anarchy and rebellion. And she's like, there's still enough fire buried beneath, like, to forge weapons, which is what her people are, and which is why Madra won't suffer them to live. So, essentially she's saying, like, a rebellion will come back. Her people will... get there. And then he takes her into a locked hall, which is, she finds odd that, like, there's a lock on a hall in the palace. And she sees this lever at the top of a platform at the end of the hall, and she's, like, drawn to that lever, and she doesn't really know why. So Heron goes around and lights the hall with torches, and she sees a couple of god statues there. It's the twin sisters Balia and Min. And they are, like, the goddesses that represent the two sons of Zilvarin. Or Zilvarin, whatever. And then Madra comes out, and she initially is speaking without being seen, which is sort of where my Wizard of Oz sort of idea came in, I think.
Yeah, got that.
But then she does, like, make herself appear. And, like, Sarah sees her, and she's completely beautiful and inviting, and, like, there's something other about her, and, like, she's drawn in, her voice is melodical, and, like, you know, it's very, she's the picture of beauty and whatever. But she's also, like, dripping in jewels and diamonds, and, like, her dress is impeccable, like, she's flaunting her wealth as well. And then she says that she doesn't normally associate with lowborn rats from the third, but she had to see if it was true that one of them stole armor from one of her guards. So, like, she's also a real big bitch.
100%.
And she's like, I want you to tell me how you fought and killed two of my men. Like, I want to know who trained you, when your meetings were, and blah, blah, blah. So essentially she's trying to ferret out rebels.
Yeah.
But I guess Saeris knew that and lied and said, oh, I trained myself. And then Madra slaps her because she knows that she's lying and asks if it was the Fae. And she's like, have they somehow gotten through and come for me? And Saeris legit is like, I don't know what you're talking about because the Fae aren't real. Like, they're stories.
Which I fucking love.
Yeah.
I know it's so
I
basic.
know.
It's like the basic shit ever. But I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Love. Perfect.
And essentially Madra tells her that the Fae are murderous warmongers and, like, they are cannibals, and when she cast them out, everybody cheered for her. But she thinks that the Fae sent Saeris to kill her. And I'm just like, well, I guess not me. Saeris is just like, what? But, like, she also knows that she can't really, like, no matter what she says, she's gonna be in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's no right answer. She can't say, no, that's not true, because...
You're bad shit.
But then she just sort of, like, goes off on a little tangent. It's like, oh, you know, I have been really bored recently, so, like, maybe, you know, it's this, I will tell you, this day gave me a little bit of a thrill because I've been so bored. There's been no threat to my power. All I've been able to do for fun is drink wine. And I'm like, samesies. And then she says, and kill peasants. So, you know, she's...
It's her people.
Yeah.
Good job. You're really getting yourself...
So that, she says, like, that's why they met in this hall. Because she had to see if everything was the same. And she's like, as long as it was the same, I know the Fae couldn't get in. So she was content that Saeris didn't know anything or, you know, whatever. So she ordered Heron to kill her. And then she said, when you're done, go to the third ward and kill anyone that matters to her. And then she says, actually, turn the entire ward to ash, which is like around 100,000 people, which is huge. Yeah.
But we also realize now, oh yeah, Carrion might not have been completely wrong.
Yeah. And she says, like, essentially they're all rats, and what do you do with a rat infestation? Like, you smoke it out and you destroy it. So, yeah.
Wild.
So Madra then orders Heron to make her sing, aka, like, torture her. And that's sort of where she's like, oh, so Madra is, like, really sick and twisted. And she leaves.
I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because, like, you're like, oh, she's gonna get murdered.
Yeah, we're like, how is she gonna be saved at this point?
Yeah.
So Heron is going to kill her here. Yeah. And she just asks him about his morals. Like, he's taking an innocent life. And he just responds, he's like, you're not innocent, you're a thief. And she's like, I'm either a thief or I'm dead, so it's the only way to survive. And, like, essentially she tells him, like, and he's just like, well, you had a choice. And she's like, you say that because you're in a position of privilege. You've never been in your position. She's like, what if it was your family? And he just he just says, death is a path we all must take, and it's a door everybody has to walk through, and be lucky that you're gonna walk through it at all. And I'm like, how would you make her not walk through the death's door? Like,
I wonder, in his, like, rant about this, I kind of wonder if he's been made to be immortal by Madra, and he's like, I wish that I could die. Like, that's kind of what I took a bit from it, is that, like, he doesn't want to be immortal, but he is. But based on literally nothing.
So he then shoves her to the ground and just tells her he's sorry for this. So, like, he does genuinely seem to have a little bit of a conscience.
More than he did
Yeah.
originally, yes.
And then he strikes her and stabs her in the stomach, and then he twists. Because, like, Madra asked him to make her sing, so, like, she's listening for the screams. So he is intentionally making her scream. But he is, like, purposefully, he's like, you know, he'll stab her, he'll scream. He's like, I know this hurts, I know this sucks, but, like, I'll make it relatively quick.
Yeah.
So she ends up coughing up blood, and then he takes one of his daggers and stabs one of her shoulders. Then he takes another dagger, leaving these things, like, in her body. He takes another dagger, and he's going to stab her other shoulder, and he stops right before he does. And she's like, oh, is he finally, like, showing mercy? But then she hears this, like, inhuman growl saying, escape, escape, escape. And then he asks her how she's doing that. And then he starts he grabs the dagger with two hands and is trying to push it into her shoulder, and it will not go. And she thinks that she desperately just wants that dagger away from her. So she forces against it in her mind, and it glows white hot, and it melts in the captain's hands. Yeah.
Love it.
And then he's freaking out and terrified because he calls this, like, heretical magic. Like, you're a heretic. Like, you're not supposed to be able to do this. So he's freaking out. Essentially, you're a witch, is what I'm thinking. Yeah. And she knows that she's gonna die because she's been stabbed in the stomach. But he is the one that had the order to take out her ward when he was done with her. So, like, she's thinking she wants him to die so that then, like, maybe Madra won't check for a while, or maybe she'll forget and her mind go elsewhere, and, like, thinking that maybe it would give the third ward time.
Yeah.
Or maybe save them. So he's, like, begging and pleading to, like, stop it, because the white hot metal is, like, heading towards him in, like, rivulets. And she knows that, like, this metal will kill him if she wants it to. And she chooses it to. She does want it to. So it starts to, like, climb his boots and his legs, looking for his bare skin. And she wants him to suffer the way she has suffered. And, like, she's like a pincushion. And she's, like, rapidly losing consciousness and coughing up blood. But, like, she's like, I have to do this. And I'm like, there's no way.
I just was like, oh, are we gonna get a new main character? Because she's fucking dead.
Yep. So she gets up, and initially she approaches him, and she wants to stab him and thinks about, like, the poetic justice of stabbing him with his own sword. But she knows that she cannot take the sword out of her stomach. So then she looks over and sees that what she thought was a lever on top of the platform was actually a sword buried in something. Like, in the ground. Not the ground, but, like, in the floor.
Yeah.
So she heads towards it, and then Heron is, like, begging and pleading her not to touch it. He sees what she's doing, and he says, don't touch it, don't open the gate.
Because he originally, like, when she first got in the room, he was like, don't go near it. She'll, like, notice, kind of thing.
So, like, the filaments of metal are still climbing his body, and he's just decided, like, no, I have to get to her. So he, like, goes for her. But by the time he rushes towards her, she's already at the top of the platform. She leans back against the sword and uses it to cut her hands apart, like her bindings.
Yeah.
But then something I don't really understand. His sword falls out of her stomach, which I don't really get, but I don't know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And she feels that something is fundamental was undone, and there's, like, no putting her back together. So this is, like, she's like, that's it now, I'm dead.
Yeah.
But, like, at the same time, she's been saying that she's been dead for, like, 5 pages.
Yeah. It's true.
So she grabs the sword and she feels a zing up her arms, and then she tells the captain that this is where he screams. And then she slices through his shoulder and chest, but it's not a death blow. Like, she knows that wound is not going to kill him. But she said that the sword, like, cut through his leather breastplate as if it wasn't even there. And he's just yelling at her to put it back. And then she notices the ground beneath her feet is softening, and she's, like, sinking into it. And she notices that it's, like, a round silver section. So the silver threads that were climbing Heron's body finally reach his neck, and his eyes roll back, and he starts to convulse. And then she realizes that the softening floor is actually a silver pool, and it's just the metal was hard, and now it's getting soft. So she goes to the edge and collapses on the edge of the pool before it turns, like, full-on liquid and she sinks into it. And she just knows she's gonna die any minute. She isn't feeling pain anymore, and she's losing consciousness. Then she sees someone come out of the pool, and she calls him Death himself, and that obviously Death is coming to claim her in person.
Love it.
So he is carrying a black sword, and originally he raises it to her and thinks she's like, oh, he's gonna end me now. But then he hears Heron rattling on and, like, looks towards him, and, like, he's sounding crazy. Like, he starts muttering. Heron mutters about how they move in the ground, obsidian, the passages, and he's just repeating these weird things over and over again. And the death guy goes over to Heron and essentially says, like, I can do nothing for you, but this is what you deserve, and then just kills him. We assume, like, because Saeris says, like, she just hears a swipe and a thud. And then he comes back to Saeris and looks at her, calls her pathetic, and then puts a chain around her neck and tells her she can't die before giving the necklace back. And then he lifts her and he takes her into the pool and she passes out. So, you know, it's,
Good
yeah,
man.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm not crazy about this pathetic thing. Like, she's literally dying.
Well, yeah. And it's a theme.
Yeah.
But.
So, eventually she wakes up and she assumes that she's still in the before that. So, the next bit is her unconscious first. And she feels freezing cold. Because, like, she's grown up in a desert with 2 sons. So, like, theoretically.
It has never been cold.
Yeah.
In her entire
I think she
life.
mentioned that there was one time they got, like, a rain shower. And it was the only time she's ever remembered being cold. Except for now. She's freezing. Mm-hmm. And she can hear voices. And she says one in particular, like, there's a woman that speaks to her and sings to her. And eventually she wakes up. And she assumes that she is at the palace because she's in a bed with, like, a mattress. There's, like, a sheet. And the thing that she finds she's like, oh, I can't be anywhere normal because there's blue paint on the wall. Or on the ceiling. And she's like, indigo is, like, way too expensive for normal people. So, like, blue is not a thing.
Yeah.
So she tries to move, but she can't, even a little. And then a woman comes in, and she's super beautiful and looks about Saeris' age, and the stranger asks how she's feeling. And Saeris coughs, like, she tries to answer, but she can't because she's just so parched. The girl comes over and offers her a glass of water, and Saeris is, like, stupefied that they are offering her 4 days worth of water in one glass. She's like, they're gonna realize that I don't get this much, and, like,
force her to
yeah,
pay
so
for
she's
it.
like, I'm gonna drink it fast before they take it from me.
Yeah.
But the girl is just like, oh yeah, drink that, and if you want some more, like, she pours her another glass, and And, like, gives it back to her and says, you can have more. Like, if you drink all that and you want some more, you can have more. Don't worry about it. So, like, just this, like, gift, like, the fact that she's giving her so much water, she's like, oh, shit, like, is she gonna make me pay for it? Like, what's happening? Mm-hmm. So she asks what her name is and tells Saeris that her name is Everlane. And then Saeris notices Everlane's ears. They are pointed fae ears. And all the stories that Saeris has heard indicate that, like, the fae are terrible, and she remembers what Madra just told her about them being warmongers and cannibals, and, like, she is scared. And Everlane sort of picks up on that and is like, what stories? Like, what have you been told? And Saeris just tells her that, like, the fae aren't real, and she thinks that, like, did Hayden do this as a prank? Like, is this all a prank on her? And she's thinking, like, was everything that just happened to me a dream? Like, what's going on? And Everlane's like, oh, we're a bedtime story in the Silver City. And she's like, yes, you are. And then something funny, she says, can I see your teeth? Yeah. And Everlane is like, no, that's rude.
They're very...
proper? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I'd love to be with a fae, but this much
well, so that's the thing.
Keep that shit away from me.
Fae are very, like, notoriously, like, the folklore of fae and the fairy, they are very manners, like, driven, right? It's about paying proper hospitality.
Yes.
So it makes sense that, you know, they're sort of a bit proper in their mannerisms.
Yeah. I get it. I just don't want to live among it.
No, yeah, I get it. Too many rules.
Yeah.
So Saeris finally tells Everlane her name, and Everlane's like, oh, Saeris is a fae name. But so the reason I need to bring it up, so remember at the beginning when we learned that her fake name was, like, Lisa something? So Everlane said, I didn't know your name, so I've been calling you Liz.
Oh.
Which is weird that she was Lisa, and then Everlane, without knowing anything about her, called her Liz. Liss.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, if that's, I don't know if that has any significance later on.
No.
But it's a bit of a coincidence, I feel.
Yeah.
So Everlane tells Saeris that their healer, Eskin, worked on her, and she's all healed. And Saeris is, like, shocked. She's like, so I'm not gonna die? And
because they literally shoved a sword into her and twisted it.
Yeah. And she finally understands. She's like, I'm not in Zilverin anymore, am I? And she's like, nope, you are in Evelia, in the Winter Palace, which is where the cold comes in. Then somebody, like, barges into the room, and Everlane calls him Renfis. And he's like, sorry, I'm here for the chain. And then him and Everlane start talking in code. And he actually calls her Lane. So from now on, I'm also going to call her Lane. And he says, he needs it. It's been 10 days. And Lane's just like, oh, but she might still need it. But Renfis just says he needs it. He's bad right now and he needs it more. And then Lane says, well, I want to see him. But then Renfis is like, well, I've been hiding him. It would be really bad if the guards found him. And it would be really bad if your dad knew he was even here. And, like, he's not fit to see you right now. So originally I was like, oh, they're together. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still not against the theory of them getting together. Based on a few things that
Lane
happened.
And the death guy?
Renfis.
Oh, no, I'm talking about death.
Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
The way this interaction was, I want to see him and stuff like that, and him being like, well, your dad's not going to like that he's here. I'm like, oh, are they sort of, these two people, are they sort of in a thing? Not Renfis.
Yes. I immediately was like, brother.
Were you?
immediate thought, yeah. Because I was like, we're not reading books anymore where we're pitting women against women. So I was like, immediately, brother, gotta be.
So Saeris is just like, oh, you need the chain, sure, like, I'll give it back to you. And I just find it weird that she was like, I can't move at all, any part of my body, and now all of a sudden she can move her arms? Anyway. Yeah. But she takes it off and notices that there's, like, a silver disc attached to it, and Rempis, like, holds out a pouch for her to put it in, like, he doesn't even want to touch it. And then Rempis tells Lane that he has to get him back to Kalish to avoid being discovered, and just says, like, if you need anything from him, just write him a letter. And then he leaves. We're like, okay, bye, dude. Then Lane suggests a bath. And Saeris is like, that seems ridiculously wasteful for water. And I'm like, how have you ever gotten clean?
Well...
Like, ever.
Did they?
Have they ever... Has she ever gotten a bath or a shower?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I'm assuming not, but I'm not equating her to my chickens, but I kind of
dust bath?
am going to. Yeah. Like, she's just getting a dust bath? Because it'll, like, take off...
Dirt.
The dirt, no
but,
way.
like, her hair would not...
Yeah.
Like, what are they...
Well, yeah. I can't even imagine. Like, I don't brush my hair for a week, and I literally am just pulling it out in chunks because it cannot be brushed.
Yeah, and, like, I guess Lane does mention that. That her hair is akin to a bird's nest.
Fair, as it should be.
So, she doesn't want a bath. And she says that. She's like, I don't need a bath. I need to get home to my brother. And Lane just says, that's not really an option for you.
Nice.
But Saeris is sort of, like, freaking out about Madra finding out about what happened and then taking it out on her ward. Because, like, I guess it's sort of, it's more than, I guess it's worse.
Yeah.
And Lane just tells her that they have been waiting to retrieve the sword that she took. The sword that she pulled out of the floor. Like, they've been looking for that sword for ages. And also, like, the fact that Saelis can do what she can do with metal, that's significant and and that she's special. We have to have we need a she's special trope. It has to happen.
I'm not as mad at it in this book as I am in other books.
So like, she's like, my dad is not going to let you go, and he wants to see you in an hour, so, like, you need to get a bath. And then she's like, she also, like, because Saelis is like, you can't do this, this is kidnapping, like, you can't keep me here. But she's like, you need to remember, we're Fae, we're not human. Because she throws around the word, this is inhumane. And she's like, but we're not human, so, like, we're gonna do things differently, and you're just gonna have to get used to it. And you need to remember that. Which I just thought is hilarious. It's like, that's where she went with it. There was no pity at all. It was, you gotta suck it up.
Yeah.
So, she says, like, maybe when you meet my dad, you can ask about returning to the Silver City. And then Saelis is like, well, who's your dad? And Lane says, oh, he's Belicon, the king of the Evelian Fae. So, that's a fun, I don't know, a fun little tidbit. Yes, a fun little turn of events. So, later on, she's in the tub, and she's feeling so guilty about using so much water. And then Lane comes in, and, like, the last few pages are sort of, like, silly. It's just, like, her getting into a dress, and she's like, I don't want a dress, I wear pants. And she's like, nope, you need to wear a dress.
I hate the trope, but I love that Lane is like, you're too pretty, you need to wear a dress, that's just the way it is. And then she makes her. It is kind of funny.
And she also, like, starts doing her hair. And then Lane tells her that dark hair is actually a trait amongst the highborn, like, royal fae. So that gets me thinking, like, okay, so she's got magic in her body because she can do this thing with the metal. Yeah. Her name is a fae name. She's got dark hair like royal fae. I was like, she is like a lost fae princess thing.
Yeah, which I also thought too, and then I was like, shit, does that mean that they're...
Oh, that would suck.
But it doesn't, because he's... Even if it was the case, we find out later that he was born before his mother ever... Yeah. But I did wonder that. I was like, shit, is she royalty now?
Yeah. So she then sort of says, like, I guess Lane sort of says, like, oh, you're so beautiful, you don't need any makeup and whatever. And she just, like, is looking in a mirror and she's like, yeah, I know I'm good looking. But she also says that, like, she comes from a place where a lot of women trade their bodies for resources like water and food and stuff, and it's a very common thing, and she really didn't want to do that. Like, that's not what she wanted out of her, like, that's not how she wanted to roll. So she liked covering her face because essentially she knew that, because she then mentioned something about how, like, nobody would take it. So she just like insinuated that somebody might get a bit too handsy and try and, like, rape her. So she liked keeping her face covered, but, like, she also recognizes that she's not in that space anymore, so she doesn't need to keep her face covered. So Lane gives her some lip balm to put on because her lips were super cracked, and then it's time to meet the king.
Don't want to meet him.
Me neither.
So they go out into the palace. I guess it's the first time she's left her room, and it's beautiful. And Everlane, like, as they're walking, bows to statues, and she tells Saeris that they are the gods. And this is one of the books that, like, so many books have gods, and I'm like, are they going to become important? Like, should we care about who these gods
like,
are?
should I remember their names?
So I'm going to explain them all, because, like, the amount of times that I'm like, oh, the gods aren't important, and then they come back in a book would be at least twice in books that we've read. So, Everlane basically says that, like, Madra knows of the gods, and she allowed them to be forgotten, and she's the only deity now. And Saeris says that people actually carry her hair and ashes of the sacrificed in pouches. So that's what that guy had in his pouch to ward off the plague, was Madra's hair, I guess, and ashes. And that's, like,
so weird.
What he thought would ward off the plague. I guess literally they think that Madra is a god. And they also think that those pouches will give them never-ending life if they're worthy enough.
Interesting.
Okay. Everlane scoffs at that and says that Madra is just human. And we're like, okay, so Lane obviously knows a lot about Madra.
But, like, also then, so my next thought...
How's she alive 1,000 years?
That is my next thought.
Yeah. 100%. Agreed. Don't understand. So we get the names of the gods. Like, Lane names them off, and she's like, Styx, which I'm like, immediately, the river Styx, is the god of shadows, and Curin is the god of secrets. And sorry if I, like, bastardize the pronunciation of these. I'm trying my best. Ninsinai is the goddess of...
Oh, dear God.
Malleus is the god of dawn and new beginnings. And Balmathin is the goddess of the sky. And at one point, a storm, like, literally split Balmathin in two and made twins Bal, the goddess of the sun and the day, and Mithin, the goddess of moon and night. And that's the same... think you already said their names. That's the same names as the sons in Saeris' world. And they look like the faces of the goddesses look similar to the faces that she saw in the Hall of Mirrors that you
I think it's slightly different. I think it's like Balayan or something and Min or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, they're
similar enough
too, and they look similar. And then we get the last god there is Xerath, and he's the god of chaos and change. And he's like more hidden, and Lane touches his foot to get and she says it's to like get his attention off of her as they pass, and like his foot is like shiny because everybody touches it as they pass to be like, leave me alone kind of thing. And Lane even says that, like, they want the gods to come back, but maybe he won't, and that would be okay. So as they pass, Saeris does the same thing and, like, touches his foot. And they're walking to see the king, obviously, but as they go along, all the Fae are looking at her with hostility. And she's also freezing, even though Lane says that it's, like, heated here by magic and fires, and it kind of makes Saeris wonder if, like, this is all a hallucination, because, like, there's magic and there's Fae, and it's the first of a bunch of times that she's like, I feel like I'm hallucinating. So they get to the king's room, and Lane is announced as Lady Everlane Debarra, and she and Saeris walk into the room, and it's filled with, like, hundreds of Fae, and there's a giant skull on the wall, and it's got, like, the orbital socket is 6 feet. The teeth are sharp and like 12 feet long. And it's over the dais. And Everlane tells Saeris that it's the last dragon. And obviously, Saeris wants to know more, but she says she'll tell her later.
I want to know about the dragon.
And she hasn't yet. I know. I want to know more, and we don't get it this week. The king is holding the sword that Saeris like took out of her own world, and Everlane curtsies to him, and Saeris doesn't, and the man next to him asks Saeris if creatures like her do not bow to kings, and she says that he isn't her king.
Wrong thing to say, girl.
I know, I love how sassy she is, but I'm also like, do you want to die? Because if you do, fair play, but like,
yeah, it's pretty bad.
So the king basically allows it because it's amusing for now, but he says, like, when she leaves this room, she's going to be part of his court, and she'll need to follow all of the rules of the court and fulfill her task. And she's like, wait a second, what's my task? And, like, interrupts him, and everyone's
like,
how
dare you?
And, like, the gallery of, like, how dare you interrupt him? But it's yeah. She thinks she needs to get back to her brother, and he says they're all dead.
Oh, well, that's good, I guess.
He says the bitch queen said she was going to kill them, so she did. And she's like, oh, great. And he also says that they saved Saeris' life, so she now owes them. And he says it's unlikely, though, that she's actually the one that woke the Quicksilver, so they need to make sure that it was actually her before her task or whatever. Of course. Yeah. She tries to cut in and say something, but he, like, slashes the sword down, and there's, like, sparks flying because sword, and tells her not to interrupt again, and tells her cooperation will determine how well she lives here, and then he just dismisses her. And she's, like, not gonna walk away, but Everlane is like, no, we need to leave. And Everlane even asks her, like, is your life worth so little? And she just says, yes. She's like, if my brother's actually dead, then you can just kill me. I don't care. Which makes me sad, because, yeah.
But at the same time, you shouldn't feel that way about your,
shitty brother.
Yes.
And then the king says, bring in the dog, and a male, like a rabid animal, is brought in by guards, and he's, like, fighting them, and Saeris hears people say, a whole bunch of shit. And they're saying, like, Living Curse, Bane of Galathrai, Black Knight, Kingfisher, Kingfisher, Kingfisher. And Lane says, shit. And she says, he's so much worse. And Saeris asks what's wrong with him, but Lane doesn't answer. And the king says this is the price of folly, madness, and death, and that he is a nightmare and torched a city on a whim. And he's back before his exile is up, and it's only been a century. Which, obviously,
it's not long enough, apparently.
No. And the king is clearly working, like, all these fae into, like, a frenzy of wanting him dead, and Everlane is stressed, and she says, Malway, please, to the old lady sitting near the king, but she, like, whispers it, and, like, there's no way she can hear it, but of course she does. And the king raises the sword over Kingfisher, and Everlane says, if she bore any love for her mother, she'll save him. And Malway stands, and the king is just like, are you supporting him? You should sit your old bones back down, because basically fuck off. But she says this is the sword calls to her, and it's a prophecy. And he's like, well, a prophecy is only for a king's ears. But she says the gods must be obeyed, lest the house Dabara fall. And her eyes go, like, white and glowing. And she grabs the edge of the sword, like the sharp edge, and starts bleeding, and there's, like, blue blood. And I don't know if that's a fae thing. I guess at some point we'll figure it out. And says that this Kingfisher does not die by his hand, not today. And he will not die by the king's hand. And he asks what he's supposed to do because he loves his people and can't let criminals walk among them. And she says, return that which you have taken from him. And the king says the sword is his. And she's like, no, I mean the pendant. And he says that it has magic and shouldn't be around the neck of a dog. Yeah. And she says the gods must be obeyed, lest the house fall, lest the winter palace fall. So he agrees to give him his sanity for a time, and people shout, like, telling him he should kill him or not. There's a whole bunch of shit. But then a loud voice says, send him to the front, and the king says, explain yourself. And then Renfis, who we met shortly ago.
Yeah.
Who is 7 foot tall and heavily
hot.
tattooed, but so hot. And I'm like, do I think he's hotter than Kingfisher?
Possibly.
Because I possibly think he's hotter than Kingfisher. Yeah. But he currently has a black eye and a split lip and a limp. And the king says he was tasked to win the war. But Renfis says that they're about to lose the war and, like, they have no chance. And in 6 months, they're done. And he's here for the only advantage they can get, Kingfisher. And basically, he's like, if you send him to the front, he'll likely die in a few days anyway, so you may as well do it. And the king is kind of backed into a corner a little bit, so he's like, fine. And he orders Kingfisher to leave in a week for the front, because first he needs to teach the girl what he knows about the Quicksilver. And when she can wake the pools herself, he's going to be banished again. You're like, cool.
Very nice of him.
Yeah. But also, he was just going to kill him. And he's, like, the only person that can teach her. It would have been really stupid to actually kill him. He seems like
maybe he's not the best at thinking, like, ahead.
No, 100%. So the king then tosses the necklace to the ground. Renfis picks it up and, like, goes to Kingfisher. And he's, like, rabid, but recognizes Renfis and, like, lets him put it around his neck. And he starts to shake, and his hands give out. And the king gives them 5 seconds to get out, and Renfis has to, like, pull him to the door. And Kingfisher finally realizes where he is and what's happening. And, like, stares at the king or the dragon skull. Because, obviously, narrator. With pain and blood and death. And it really gives me, like, a Nesta moment of, like, pointing the finger. You're like, yeah, he's pissed. I'm pretty sure it's at the King Saeris.
Yeah, and we do get a little bit more. Like, we get a little something on that.
Yeah. So, Lane asks the king to leave, because obviously they're not allowed to until they're dismissed, because Saeris needs to get started on everything, and he's basically like, yep, but she's your responsibility now. So they leave, and they catch up to Kingfisher, who has vomited everywhere.
Amazing.
In the hallway. And, yeah, of course. And Lane is pissed at Renfis. But he's like, I was attacked while I was trying to get the pendant back to him. And Kingfisher is just like, please stop. Like, stop bickering around me. And it's the first time we've heard him speak.
Apart from saying pathetic.
Yeah. Apart from the beginning. And a thrill rockets up Saeris' body.
It does.
And her hair stands at attention. And she feels shock to her soul.
Of course.
And I'm like, is this a mate thing? Is this going to be a mate thing? Is that what's happening?
Who knows?
We don't know yet. And she sees his eyes are an unreal shade of green. And one has silver. And she thought that originally when he took her, she imagined the silver, but it's actually in his eye.
Cool.
Yeah. Lane says he went through the pool and it was reckless, and he's just like, hello, Lane. But she asks why and says he should have just let it close. And he just says he needs whiskey and a bed. Preach. And she tells them both to go sleep in her room, and then she goes to, like, grab Saeris to, like, bring her back to her own room. And Saeris is like, no, you can't drag me around like an animal. Like,
yeah, I'm a person, yeah.
If you want me to go somewhere, ask me to. And Lane says, like, it isn't safe here. And Saeris is like, yeah, I know that. And, like, to be fair, obviously we've seen her life before. She wasn't safe anywhere. Yeah. Like, I completely sympathize with her here. And then Saeris is like, you should have said that you were at war. I didn't realize that. And Lane is just like, oh, I thought I told you, but we're always at war, basically. And she's like, even Fae that treat you like your friends are going to stab you in the back. They're all shitty. Ugh. And then Saeris is like,
all these people suck.
Yeah, but she's also like, does that mean that Lane is one of those people? I'm like, oh, I hope not. I like her already. So then we kind of jump a little bit to the next day, and Saeris sees a lot of differences here. There's only one sun, and it goes down at night. Wild. And there's also snow outside, which is new for her. But it's obviously the Winter Palace. But there's also big trees and, like, a giant blue river, and she kind of thinks that she might be hallucinating again, because she's like, what the fuck is going on? And they go to, like, a beautiful, unimaginable library, and it's nothing like the one that her mother worked at in the third, that you needed a token and a recommendation from your employer to get to, and she was allowed there because her mother worked there, so she used to look up middle work while she...
Which was cool.
To, like... Yeah. And makes sense, I guess. And then an older male, Rosarius, shows up. And he's, like, cool. He doesn't immediately hate her. Yeah. He's, like, not immediately a dick to the human. So we're like, what a good guy.
Oh.
But he says that he was attacked in bed, and he stabbed one of the attackers in the ass. But they dragged him back to be the librarian. And he's, like, fine with it, but it's just kind of funny. And he says this is the first time a human has been here in an age. And he introduces himself and asks who she is. And he's, like, genuinely curious. And she, like, bows to him to show respect, which is, like, interesting in the differences of the way she
considering
met the king.
She's, like, it's like she... I think it's, like, demonstrating that she doesn't show respect to just anybody.
Yeah, but she respects him. So, like, we now love him. But... she says that her name is Saeris Fane, and that she's an apprentice glassworker from the third spoke in the Silver City. And he asks if the Quicksilver woke and says she's an alchemist. And then Lane is like, well, we don't know that for sure. Just that Kingfisher felt Solus calling and found it in her hands. So we get now that Solus is the name of the sword. And Saeris says that if she was holding Solus, then she's an alchemist. Then Lane says, like, alchemists are fae, though. So, interesting. And the source of all of our whatever.
Yes, yes. No, 100%. Like, I don't...
Yeah. So, Kingfisher then says she must have fae blood, enough so that Solus didn't burn her, but not enough to matter. He's a fucking dick. Like, I know that we love a broody male who's a bit shitty, but he's actually a dick in this beginning part.
He is, yeah.
Lane is pissed that Kingfisher is here and he didn't wait for Renfis. But Fisher is, like, armed to the teeth and says, like, he realizes he's in danger and he jokes a bit. And we kind of get a moment where Lane is like, I've seen you and I've seen Ren naked. And I'm like, ugh, this is just trying to, like, make the narrative that she's maybe with Fisher so that, like, you know, we get, like, a triangle-y thing. But it doesn't last too long, so I'm happy about it. But we also get that he has, like, a neck plate that has, like, two wolves on... No, a wolf on it or something. I don't know if it's important, but it just comes up a lot.
No, just
what?
That it comes up a lot.
Yeah. So he then says that no one's going to attack him since he has a sword, and Saeris, like, stares at the sword, and when he tells her it's rude to stare at a man's hardware, she compares it to a toothpick, and they, like, have a whole bunch of it, like... It's kind of funny, but it's a bunch of dick jokes, basically.
Yeah, and they do it a lot. Like, it is something that they both keep coming back to, is, like... It's, like... Her attitude... She just keeps the attitude that she's always had. Like, she said she slept with Carrion because she was sick of him strutting around like he knew how to please a woman, and then she felt like he proved to her that he actually does know how to please a woman, and she was pissed about it. So, like, she really is engaging with him, like, and talking, like, dick jokes, and, like, they bring up all the time. He's like, oh, you want to kiss me, or, like, something like that. And, like, she's, like, denying it, and I don't know, it just seems very much in her character to be like, nope, I hate your guts.
Yeah. She's got a type. Ren laughs at the joke, and Fisher says that his sword has slain thousands, and she tells him that he should get it looked at if it's slain thousands, and I laughed at that joke. I liked it a lot. And I also love that Saeris just doesn't get the jokes. He's like, no, but the sword has slain thousands. I don't know why you're laughing. And then Lane just, like, gets them all to sit at chairs, and she pulls out a history book and an etiquette book. And Saeris is just, like, not having it. She's like, I need to get back. And then she asks Lane if she has a brother, which is obviously hilarious. And if she would want to know for certain if her brother was alive or dead. And Lane is just like, it's more complicated than that. And Fisher's like, is it? And he actually says that he admires Saeris' loyalty to family. And then he says there's a chance that her brother is alive because there's a chance that, like, Madra will conscript him, to an army, because obviously the Quicksilver's woken up, so Madra knows that. So she knows that there's a possibility that the Fae are going to come back and fight, so there's a possibility that, like, she's going to need soldiers. And at this point, Madra only has about, like, 2,000 soldiers. So would be swept away by Bellican's like 30,000. And she originally tricked him and cut off trade lines. And there's a rumor that there's Dianthus ear in Zilverin. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but is it fucking her? Because she's got magic. Like, is it immediately? So I'm assuming it kind of seems like Bellican is the king right now, but like maybe he's not the rightful king, but there's no heir to the rightful king. I don't know at all. I've only read like this week in a tiny bit, but that's my assumption. So I'm like, does that mean that this heir could overthrow him? Which it kind of seems like, because they're like, he'll decimate the entire place to kill this.
Well, and there's a lot of drops been given as to a possible ancestry, right? Like the fact that they're like, she's an alchemist, but alchemists are fae. Well, she is. And like, she's got the dark hair of royal-born fae. Her name is like a fae name. So like, they are dropping significant hints.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I'm like, is that her? And also, why? Maybe the king already thinks it might be her. I don't know, but you'd think that he'd do something. Anyway, who knows? So, Saeris thinks like, okay, it's possible that her brother is still alive, and obviously her spoke is still alive because the queen's gonna need
army,
soldiers. Yeah. So she thinks she'll give it some time to save her brother, and Lane says that they don't even know if it was actually her that woke up the Quicksilver. And Kingfisher's like, it couldn't have been Herod. And if he could activate it, he would have, like, if Kingfisher could activate it, he would have razed the city to the ground a long time ago. And Lane says he shouldn't have given her the pendant, but he says he still had the ring. And she says it wasn't enough. And says he took more in. And he says it doesn't matter. He got the sword and a new pet for her who can do magic that will help them. So, like, they're kind of having an argument back and forth. And we're like, this is very brother and sisterly. But she says that they're going to fix it, but he says there's nothing to fix and shuts her down. And Ren says they're already fighting a war, and Kingfisher says, like, the last time he fought in the war, a city was burnt to the ground, and he spilled enough blood, and you kind of get, like, I kind of got a little feeling that, like, the reason he burnt the city to the ground had something to do with Lane, but we didn't really get that, but it kind of felt like it. But Ren basically asks him to do this for his friends. And then Fisher asks Saeris if she's ever channeled a metal's energy before, and if she's, like, has any experience in a forge. And she says yes to both, but she kind of, like, laughs at the second one because, like, that was her job.
Well, like, she trained under Elroy, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder how different it is working with metal than glass. Like, I wonder how different they are, because if she was primarily, like, I know that she, like, did deal with metals, but if he changed to mostly a glass forge, like, I wonder how different it was. Like, how much experience does she have with either?
Yeah, well, she probably has a lot of experience with glass, but she only has, like, theoretical experience with metal, I guess. But it did say that Elroy used to work with metal, so I don't know, maybe she has a little bit. So on the way, Saeris struggles to, like, keep up because obviously I think every fae is like 7 feet tall or something, and they're just fast.
And hot.
Of course. Hot. She thinks it's probably a good time to try to escape, but she can't really, because she, A, doesn't know how to use the portal, or B, where to find it, because she was passed out when she got here. And she's also just interested in seeing, like, a Fae forge, because obviously she spent her time in a forge, and
she's interested in it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure she did, like, originally, and I don't know if it says it at some point in this section or in another section or what. Like, it does say that this was a trade that she was, like, going to, like, follow. She was apprenticing for Elroy, so, like, this was going to be her job.
Yeah. It just feels like there was no way that she was ever gonna, like, have that mediocre of a life because she's out here stealing shit from guards and stuff, like. But yes, if she was a normal person, this would have been her job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lane starts arguing that she needs to learn theory first, and Fisher's just like, there is no theory on this. Like, we don't have alchemists anymore. We don't know how they did what they did. What do you mean theory, kind of thing? And then Lane's like, well, she needs to learn about living here. And then Kingfisher, like, prowls towards Saeris, and she's like, she gets the prey instinct and, like, backs away because obviously he's a predator. But he tells her she isn't safe here. And then we get a super interesting thing that I didn't really see coming because I just didn't expect it, and I like it. But he shows her his long fangs and says that there actually used to be a lot of humans that lived here, and that their ancestors were actually cursed and needed human blood to survive, and that's what kind of gave them their immortality. But they don't need it anymore, but they still have the teeth for it, and, like, you can kind of assume, like, they still have the taste for it. Which is just interesting.
Yeah, so they're like fae, but they're also vampires.
Yeah, which I'm here for. I love it. Elaine kind of, like, breaks in this moment. She, like, starts crying and is like, you don't need to be so much of an asshole. And he's just like, that's who I am. And she says that he's her brother, though sometimes she wishes he weren't, which probably doesn't feel good. And then he tells her to be careful. They can't spill all of their secrets. And I was like,
what secrets?
Yeah, I feel like this whole raising an entire town thing has something to do with Lane, based on very little, because I haven't actually read much more of the book than this week, but I'm like, there's something. And anyway, so she just, like, bolts. And Saeris says she should go after her because they're, like, kind of friends now. And Ren's like, you can't go anywhere alone, so I'll come with you. But Fisher's just like, she's not gonna leave. And Ren says that Fisher's being an ass. But he just says that he was cut off from civilization, and that has a way of changing you. So we're assuming, like, it was 100 and whatever, 10 or something years that he was just, like, alone.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that probably would change you. And Ren just says they didn't forget about him, and he doesn't know what they went through while he was gone. And he's just like, what you guys went through? Like, obviously what he went through was worse, but that doesn't mean, you know.
That doesn't mean everyone else was, like, comfy cozy and just doing nothing.
And that they didn't care about what was happening. It's a bad situation, and Saeris is just, like, in the middle of all of this.
Yeah. Especially since we don't even have all the information. We're like, oh, it's a bad situation, but we don't actually know what the bad situation was. Like, we have no idea what they're talking about. We have no idea what's going on here. Like, we are totally in the dark.
Yeah. So it's, and so is she. It's real awkward to just be there while they're all fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Then Kingfisher says, Oshalith? Not sure. Won't go because she wants to learn secrets. And Saeris is just like, why are you calling me that? And he says it's a type of butterfly, I guess, that hatches and dies on the same day. and the cold kills it. So, like...
I mean, it's sort of like... It is sort of her.
Yeah, but it shows that he's, like, he notices how...
cold she is.
Yeah, because she's used to having 2 sons and being too hot all the time. Like, he's more observant, I think, than he wants to let on. But also how little he thinks of humans because their lifespans are so short.
Yeah.
She obviously decides to go with him. Like we said, she is curious about the forge, and he's the only one that's really telling her anything.
Yeah, he's being honest. Everyone else is just sort of glossing over everything, and he's the only one that is like, I don't care if you don't like it. I'm going to tell you the truth. Yeah.
So, she decides to go with him. They basically get to the forge door, and she's like, are you gonna knock? And he just, like, kicks the door down and says, knock, knock.
Ah.
She's like, okay. And he's like, after you. And she's like, what if there's, like, a ward or something? And he says he would know if there were, because he is magic. And she's just like, what? And he says his looks, his sword skills, his personality are magic. You know, he's super cocky. And she just says that his personality is trash because she gets mouthy when she's nervous or something. Which you're like, that's the worst time to get mouthy.
But I mean, he's not wrong though.
No, it's just, yeah. So they go inside, and the forge has basically been left to ruin. It's covered in vines and frost and rust and glass. And Kingfisher says he's going to kick Clement's teeth down his throat because apparently he's being paid to look after the forge and obviously has not been doing it.
Nice.
Right? Pretty unfortunate. So, and you'd think that, like, this Clements guy would be like, oh shit, there's someone coming with Quicksilver.
Yeah.
Like, he would have figured that out and done something by now, but I don't know if we ever meet him. She actually just starts, like, looking through everything, seeing if there's anything useful, and starts cleaning up. And he's just like, what are you doing? And she's like, obviously cleaning, and that he should help unless he can use his magic. And he says that magic is a gift only to be used for a righteous purpose. So they start cleaning, and she asks questions, because that was half the reason she came. So she first asks if there's, like, other palaces, because obviously this is the Winter Palace. And he, like, takes his sword off, and she's like, whoa, don't kill me. But he's just, like, hauling his armor off, because he's got a shit ton of armor on, so to clean, he's just taking it off. But it is kind of funny. And he's just like, that question's stupid, and you can learn it in a book. Ask me something else. Which I kind of love.
Like, it is sort of valid, and it seems like while he is brusque and, you know, sort of unfriendly, I think he is more deliberately cruel in front of others, as of this point.
Yeah, but you also have to, like, if he was in, like, solitary confinement, basically, for 100 years... and he came back and then was almost just murdered in front of everybody. And, like, I don't know. There's clearly some trauma here. He's not at his best.
Yeah.
I haven't seen his best yet. Maybe he gets worse. I don't know. So she asks what his pendant is and why he's unhinged without it. Which I just kind of love that she, like, goes for the throat. Because I'm like, yeah. But he tells her that Quicksilver is volatile. And some believe it has sentience, and if it comes in contact with skin, and then he kind of trails off. And she says there must have been Quicksilver in Heron's dagger, because when it attacked him, he started seeing things. And he kind of says, like, it'll push anyone beyond sanity. So that's interesting.
So I wonder, like... the Quicksilver in his knife, or in his dagger that he was using on her, would it not have been activated without her taking the sword out of the ground, I wonder?
But, you mean Heron? It did activate, because she activated it before... She activated the Quicksilver in his sword before she took the sword out.
So, like, does she have to talk to it first, or, like... I'm just wondering, like, if there's Quicksilver in the dagger, and if touching Quicksilver to skin, like, makes you go insane.
But I think it's only when it was liquid.
So it has to be in its liquid state?
Yeah, because that's when it's awake. When it's asleep, it doesn't matter.
Oh.
It can't seep in. It kind of seems like.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure. He says that his mother actually gave him this relic when he was 11, and he traveled through the Quicksilver, like, it seems like he did it a lot, but there was one time he was forced to travel through it without the pendant, and a healer pulled a lot of the Quicksilver out, but not all of it. And the pendant calms the noise in his head and keeps him sane. And she's just like, realizes, I guess, that his eye has silver in it because that's Quicksilver, which is kind of insane to be like, this is a poisonous.
Yeah.
And it's in his eyeball.
Yeah.
Like, that's not great.
Well, it just shows that it's, like, deeply rooted in his brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So she asks why he gave it to her, and he shows her the ring and says, like, she would have died if he didn't give her the pendant, and he already had the ring, so he was fine. And he just says, like, she's the one who can open the portals and, like, wake the Quicksilver, I guess. And they need trading, because that's, like, what was cut off. But he only did it to use her as a bargaining chip, and it was selfish, and he would have let her die otherwise. Like, if he had just, in any other situation, he would have just let her die. But because she can, like, control the Quicksilver.
That's nice.
Was being selfish. She's like, yeah. She's like, great, good. Ren shows up then and is just like, you haven't even started. What's going on? And shadows cover the room, because of course they do. And
he's a shadow daddy.
He is a shadow daddy. And she's just like, what the fuck? And it's like true dark. And I think she like screams out or something. And Ren just says, enough. And he pulls back the shadows, and the forge is perfect. Like, completely cleaned. All the rusted stuff is in pristine condition, and it's warm. She was like, she'd been shivering this whole time cleaning it, and now it's like a good temperature, and she's just like, what the fuck?
So when he was like, oh, magic can only be used for noble purposes,
yeah,
he was bullshitting her.
100%. So she rounds on him, and he's just like, he just says that he wanted to see if she knew what hard work was. And I like, obviously we know her past, so it's one of those moments of like
you don't know her.
Yeah, like Rowan and Selena being like, you're pampered, and it's like, well, not really.
No, she isn't.
Like, yeah, it's one of those moments, and you're like, I guess eventually he's gonna find out how shitty her life was, and then he's gonna have to feel bad. But
yeah.
So we jump to the next day, and Lane just says that they collected all the books on alchemy if Saeris wants to come. And she's kind of like a bit, you can tell she's pissed that Saeris didn't come after her. So she literally just says she does want to come look at the books, and she apologizes for yesterday, and they're just immediately back to being friends. And she's like, okay, cool. She just wanted an apology.
Yeah, which is what we should all strive for in our lives.
Yeah, I just like that it wasn't like
drawn
out. Yeah.
And it's not like there's this hidden like resentment. Like it's like, okay, cool, we're good again.
Yeah, like you actually mean it and you are sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they get to the library, and Saeris is just like yelling at Kingfisher because he's eating there. And Lane tries to like talk to him, but he's just like, we kind of get a bit later that he doesn't have anywhere to eat because like everybody hates him. He doesn't have his own rooms here. Like they're in Lane's rooms. Got nowhere else to go. But instead of like, I guess being vulnerable about it, he just kind of gets pissed, which like, I get it. But he just says that he'll go out with the dogs and leaves. And then Ren goes after him and says that he'll train him to, like, help calm him down. I'm like, I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Them training together.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And as Ren goes to leave, he says that Kingfisher deserves some grace. He has no rooms or, like, anything here. And imagine 110 years alone. And Lane just says she did. And now she gets to see what the time did to him. And Ren says there's a way to fix him. And Lane is just feeling, like, super hopeless. But he kind of just says that he has enough hope for the three of them.
Aww.
Which I kind of love. He's very sweet. Lane goes to, like, just start opening the books. But Saeris is just like, are you okay? And Lane starts to say he was the best thing in her life, but he's gone and it's hard to watch. But then Saeris shows up and kind of, like, cuts her off. But obviously it's sad.
Yeah. Well, her dad seems like a dick.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, we got that her mother had died, and, like, I guess he was really the only person in her family.
Mm-hmm.
And now, obviously, he's going mad with the Quicksilver, and also because 110 years spent in solitude and forced out, whatever that word is. Exiled, yes, thank you. So yeah, we kind of just get straight into learning a bit about alchemy. So it's magic, and there are 3 branches of Fae that do alchemy. One branch was trying to discover immortality. Another branch would create and invent by transmuting metals, and they could use it to, like, make gold so that they could just have more riches and, like, that kind of stuff.
Which seems very helpful.
Yeah. And then the third, we're trying to cure illness and disease. And we get that she's likely, obviously, the second one that can change metals and transmuting. And we also get that a lot of the transmuting alchemists went mad and killed themselves.
Oh.
So we're like, that's
nice.
good, great. That's what you want to hear. Mm-hmm. That's what you want somebody to tell you about your newfound magic.
Yes.
And a lot of it was because they were trying to, like, control the Quicksilver. So it's like, oh, good.
So what they want her to do.
Yeah. We also get, which I this was just kind of a funny moment that, like, you obviously need to talk about, but we get that Saeris speaks Common Fae because Madra, the queen, spoke Common Fae. So there are other human dialects and there are other Fae dialects, but it's just that, like, I kind of want to know where Madra came from, because it sounds like she kind of came from here or something, because, like, that's why they can all understand each other and she can read all these books, because, you know,
yeah,
you would kind of expect her not to be able to, but they're just all speaking Common Fae.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, thank you for explaining, because I did kind of think of that earlier. So she actually asks about Madra, and we get that she must have been spelled with long life. And we also get, like, she didn't actually need an alchemist to close the Quicksilver. She just needed to use, I guess, that specific sword, or, like, sword like that. And all of the pathways closed, so there were some Fae that were, like, in other places that got stuck there. So Saeris asks about Fae lifespan then, because she's like, could they still be there? Like, how long do you guys even live? And we get that Lane is 1,486.
So not 24.
Yeah. And she looks like 28 or something, or, like, I don't remember what she's just older than Saeris. And then Saeris asks how old Kingfisher is, and she's like, I really shouldn't tell you because it's not my business to say, but she's like, but I do know. And she says he's 1,730. And he cuts in and says 33.
They're talking about him.
And he heard it. And then he's just like, you shouldn't be telling my secrets. He's like, you're finally answering her questions and telling her things, but you're giving away my secrets. Which is kind of fair. And then he tells Saeris to ask him next time if she wants to know something about him. But he's there to, like, take her to the forge. So they go to the forge. And they kind of continue the conversation. And she says that he'll lie. And he disagrees. And it kind of makes me wonder if they can't lie. I'm, like, wondering if that's one of those Fae things. But we don't get that yet.
Yeah, and I don't actually remember that.
Yeah. There's kind of tidbits of it, or, like, is he just gonna be honest, because why not?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. So she kind of makes a joke that Aelroy says that, like, all men are gonna lie when you ask them how big their dick is. So she basically asks him how big his dick is, and I'm like, why? Why?
Because she's inexplicably drawn to him.
Ugh. And he says, big enough to make her scream.
Nah, not necessarily a lie.
No. And she says he's lying, but he calls her a hungry bitch in heat.
Gross.
And says she's not asking the right questions. And I'm like, we're supposed to hate him, right? Like, a little bit here?
I guess.
Like, ugh. So she asks him if he actually raised an entire city. And he says yes, and he says it's because he had to. And she asks why, and he says she'll never be ready to know because she's a weak human, and the reason won't be enough. And I'm just like, why though?
Yeah, like, he says, oh, I'll never lie to you, and, like, he's not lying, but at the same time, he's not telling the truth.
But this is why I think it had something to do with Lane, and I, like, based on very little, I'm like, there's something going on. So she asks where he was banished to, and he says hell, and he hopes she never knows it. And I'm like, does this mean she's going to get banished there at some point too? Like, is this foreshadowing of some kind? Based on nothing, obviously, I have no idea. And then he tells her to hold out her hand, and she does, and he puts something in her palm, and then he holds her hand closed with both of his hands, and it starts to, like, burn her, but it's freezing, and she can't let go, and she, like, begs him to make it stop, but he says she can, and basically calls her weak and pathetic, and he tells her to listen to it, and she says fuck you, and he calls her a bitch in heat again, because of course he does, and he tells her to move through the pain, and, like, he tells her to prove him wrong, that she's not as weak as he thinks she is, kind of, and she's like, that's what finally gets me to do it, and I'm like, bleh.
Yeah, this is not a good form of encouragement.
No. But she hears a million voices, and they are saying, like, I guess, one thing, 2 words kind of thing, and then she screams out, Anarath more, and she immediately sees that he's surprised by that, but we have no idea why. And she opens her hand, and they both look at it, and it's liquid Quicksilver in her hand now. So she obviously tries to throw it, because he literally just said, it makes you go mad.
Yeah.
But he says she's safe since she's touching him, and he's wearing the pendant. And he tells her that this was a test.
Of course it was.
Yeah. And that she has to now, like, make it still again, so, like, turn it back into a solid. And he tells her to, like, feel it in her mind. So she does, and she tells it to sleep. And it says, no, not sleep, slept for too long. Which is just, like, I don't know, spooky. But she says it more firmly then, and then it's a solid. And he just says he expected that to go differently. And I'm like, did you expect her to
not do it?
Yeah, either not do it or, like, go mad. What did you expect? But she just punches him in the face.
I love it.
I love it too. So I guess it's the next day, and Lane is, like, pissed that she punched him. And Saeris doesn't actually say what he did, because she doesn't want, like, to get him in trouble.
She's
kind of
pissed
thing.
at Saeris, or she's pissed at Kingfisher?
She's pissed at Saeris for punching him, because she's like, he could have just killed you for doing that, and, like, I'm surprised he didn't go into a rampage. And she's like, well, he's a monster then, like, yeah. And then we get that after she punched him, he carried her back and he kicked in the door and threw her on the bed and said, "Bad human." And I was like, is it bad that I think that's hot?
You have a praise kink?
Maybe. And then we get some backstory, I guess. We get that Lane's mother was married before, and obviously Kingfisher came from that marriage. And this part kind of confused me.
Okay.
Because she says that when he was 10, his father was sent on a mission and the Quicksilver stilled. So the king blamed his father and called him a traitor. So how did Kingfisher travel a bajillion times through the Quicksilver before the age of 10? Because if it closed when he was 10, like, it made it seem like he used to travel through it when he was an adult earlier.
I don't have my book on me, but that doesn't sound...
No.
Because, yeah.
It kind of confused me, so I don't know. And maybe before this point, the Quicksilver was just always liquid? Like, I don't know.
I think that's correct. I think it's naturally always a liquid.
Because even right now, the sword is out of it, but I think it's still solid. So maybe there was 2 incidences with the Quicksilver? I don't know. Maybe we'll get more information on it, but it kind of confused me. But all that to say, basically a year later, the king announced his marriage to her mother, even though her mother had never met him, and it was just because she had a lot of money. And the king was pissed that she, like, brought Kingfisher when she came to marry him, and I guess just expected her to, like,
leave him home?
The kid? Yeah. Who knows? And he obviously wanted his own son because he's a king, but she died in childbirth with Lane, and it was all Fisher's fault. So basically we're getting, like, the king blames everything on Fisher.
Yeah, so I think, like, the whole point of that is that, like, wrongfully, I'm not saying it's correct, but wrongfully, the king sort of thinks that, and it's our typical trope of, like, fairies having a lot of trouble conceiving a child and growing a child. Yeah. They have a lot of difficulty in childbirth. So, in the king's mind, she expended all of her energy and all of her quote-unquote luck conceiving Fisher.
Yeah.
And therefore, when Lane was born, her luck and all of her energy couldn't go into making Lane and making Lane a boy. So,
yeah.
You know, it's sort of like, oh, it's just my luck, and like, oh, this is all Fisher's fault because you sapped all your mother's energy.
Yeah.
Like, completely ridiculous, but the king is unhinged.
Yeah. I'm just surprised that he didn't actually just, like, have another wife and try again.
I know, I'm actually quite shocked too.
So Lane then leaves to go get breakfast, and Saeris sits and thinks of, like, the Quicksilver and Anorath more. She still doesn't know what that means. And then there's a knock on the door, and she just assumes it's Lane with, like, her hands full. So she just, like, swings the door open and then, like, kneels down to look under the bed for her shoes. But of course it isn't Lane, it's Fisher, and he makes a comment about a woman on her knees for him. Like, of course. And then he just, like, comes in and sits down at the table and says he's hungover, so she can't shout at him, punch him, or make him do any physical activity. And he just starts eating, and she's like, what the fuck are you doing here? But he says, like, when he brought her back the other day, he saw what her room was like and decided he was going to eat here instead of the library. Fair. So he starts eating, and his lip starts bleeding.
Sorry, I hate this.
And he licks it, and she just immediately, like, gets hot because he licked the blood off. And he says that Faye has an excellent sense of smell. And she just thinks how much she hates him, but he's just like, you're making it worse. And it's just so awkward.
So he can smell her being turned on.
Yeah. So she asks why he didn't get his lip mended, basically. But he says he's keeping it as a reminder since he likes surprises and he's a fan of aggressive foreplay. Like, that could get interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And she chokes on the cheese that she's eating. And he just says swallow. And you're like, super suggestive.
Mm-hmm.
Lane shows up then while she's choking and tells Fisher that he should have showered the sex off of him if he was going to come here. But it's obviously just that she can smell Saeris.
Yeah, turned onness.
Yeah, which is awful.
And assumes it's from him, not her.
Yes. And he just apologizes. And then he's like, I'm going to go to the bathing whatever and shower it off, basically. So he didn't call her out, which I guess is nice, but it's also just like so awkward.
Yeah.
So she goes to the library after that and she asks to learn about Quicksilver instead of the quartz, and Saeris agrees because if she doesn't learn enough in I guess the week she has with Kingfisher, the king is going to punish Fisher and probably punish her. And we're like, great, that's great. So she asks how they end up where they need to go. And he's just like, oh, it's super easy. You just need to focus on the place that you're looking for. So, like, the Fae used to go to the Quicksilver and then think of something they needed, like iron ore, and they would focus on that, and the Quicksilver would take them somewhere that had
a lot of
whatever they were looking for. Yeah.
Very convenient.
But it could end badly. Like, one time they were looking for hydrogen and could have ended up on a star or something. Like, doesn't always work out because you're not actually like, and you don't know who else lives in that place. So then she asks if there's a pool here, and it's the largest ever documented, and it can transport armies. So she's obviously just trying to get information because literally she was like, I should run now, but I don't know if there's a pool and I don't know how to get home. So obviously she's trying to find out those two things. Mm-hmm. So she starts taking notes on other information that he's giving, and like we get little snippets of like what the Quicksilver pools are like in different courts or different places in this world. But I didn't know if it was important, and it was getting too long anyway. So I was like, if it comes up, it comes up again. But the whole time she's taking these notes, she's just thinking of home. So we're like, that's what she's gonna try to do. Escape.
Love it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it for this week. Our first week with Quicksilver.
Woo!
Definitely interesting.
It's long, but it's so good and so interesting, and like it's a new take on the sort of Fae thing that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. I love this. I want to see where this vampire thing goes.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Just you wait.
I am ready. So yeah, I guess that's going to wrap it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, you can reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week we will be reading chapters 12 to 21, 12 to 20 of Quicksilver by Callie Hart. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.